and welcome to Rewind Reviews, the 98th episode of Rewind Reviews. But not really, but 98 episodes. What do we do when we celebrate 100, Chris? Do I say happy 112th? Because
no, I think just like no, it's fine. Like the celebration is 100 or thereabouts, and that's Tale of the 10th, which will technically be a bonus or 101 anyway, so it's all good.
Yeah, 100 numbered episodes, and then 12 non-numbered episodes we snuck in during that period of time. But yeah, well, welcome everyone. We are doing the big one, or the big three, really. The prequel trilogy, much maligned, much discussed. Terrified about doing these because what hasn't been said about these movies. All I can do is report back on the experience I just had rewatching The Phantom Menace. So,
yeah.
I guess before we start, we'll do our usual. We won't need to do our general Star Wars. How do we get into Star Wars? Like, what's our history with Star Wars? Because we will have covered that a long time ago, admittedly, in a galaxy far, far away. But we will have done that on the original Star Wars podcasts. So, Chris, do you recall seeing the prequels for the first time?
I do. I can't pinpoint exactly, because I saw this movie at the cinema 3 times, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I saw it once with some friends, once definitely with my dad and a mate, and I feel like I saw it a third time, maybe with a different friend or with my dad and a different friend. I don't know for sure. Maybe with like my uncle and my cousins, and then maybe my dad and another mate. But I saw it. I remember seeing the trailer as well, like Live and Kicking. I think it was made a big deal of we've got the trailer, which I look back on now and go, the trailer must have been airing on other stuff as well. There's no way, like, because they were bigging it up like it was an exclusive. And I look back now and go, surely there's no way in the UK the exclusive for that trailer went to Live and Kicking. But
I think for television, yeah, probably, right? Because back then there's no internet. Well, there's not no internet, but there's no internet isn't fast enough for you to stream a trailer. I remember it was a big deal that the trailer for Attack of the Clones was available on Apple, but it took hours to download, and it played in like 280p, and it was like a little potato quality thing in the middle of it. My large screen had this like tiny little window inside of it that was playing this trailer. It's possible, because this movie's trailer was a big deal, and I remember stories of theaters reporting huge influxes of ticket sales from people who were buying tickets to see whatever movie, going in, watching the Phantom Menace trailer, and then leaving. This is the hype this movie had behind it. A phenomenon that is literally impossible now, because when a trailer comes out, it comes out online. Everyone has access to it from their own home, because why wouldn't you want to make your trailer as available as possible? But it's interesting that scarcity will have had an impact on the success of this movie. There was that. The hype was real, and I'm with you. Like, I remember seeing the trailer in front of another movie. I don't think I saw it on TV. I saw it in front of another movie, and I almost shit my pants. Like, it was like, as a huge Star Wars kid growing up, when I'd heard they were making a new Star Wars movie, my excitement was just absolutely like the sentence doesn't exist to express my excitement for this movie. And I remember I was living in Ireland at the time, and they were going to get it later, but my mum and dad had planned a trip to the UK, to England, sorry. Well, the UK, but England in this specific case. And I think that meant I could see it sooner, because I remember my parents had no interest in wanting to see the movie at all. So they made my uncle take me. But I think I saw it opening weekend as a result, and I probably did then see it once or twice more. But like, I cannot tell you how excited I was. But yeah, so what was do you remember your experience seeing it the first time? Did you enjoy it? How did you feel?
I remember enjoying it. I remember feeling that sense of, I'd always found Star Wars. Sorry, I swallowed some water wrong. As we talked about on the Star Wars episodes, I think I'd always found Star Wars tricky to understand, whereas I felt like this was potentially more accessible, or that feeling of like, oh, it's a new Star Wars movie, I can share that experience with my dad. I just talked about, like, in my head, him loving Star Wars a lot, which he did, but I think I talked again about that on the last one, so I won't retread. But I remember being excited. I remember enjoying them, and I also remember, I could bring this fact up any week, but I'll bring it up now. I think I've talked about it before. I remember me and some friends. I remember friends being excited about these movies as well. And I remember me and some friends years later when they were all out on like Blu-ray, and I was in secondary school. So I'm like, what? I don't know, maybe like 15, 16. Me and some friends doing a thing where we met up with the intention of binge watching all 6 movies in one sitting. But we didn't start until like 2, 3 p.m. So we got through the first 4, and most of us were asleep for A New Hope. So in that particular sitting, the only film we really properly watched was probably Phantom Menace and maybe Attack of the Clones. Why we started so late, I have no idea. But yeah, so no, I remember sitting in the cinema and enjoying the movie for sure. What about you?
I mixed things because it's hard to it's hard to separate the natural disappointment that's always going to be felt when you're this excited for anything from actual, I don't think I loved that, but I still enjoyed it enough. There was enough colourful, creative chaos on screen that I think I was walked away satisfied as a child. But I distinctly remember something was niggling as we left the cinema. It was a bit of a, not a pit in my stomach, but just like a hole. Like I couldn't fill it. And I couldn't really explain it. And I attribute this now, and I could be rewriting history a little bit because you don't know. But when I think back to that, I think it might have been me coming to terms for the first time in my life with actually not having immediately just loved a movie. Like out the gate. I was at that age where I loved everything. Almost. There's very few movies I did not enjoy. And I did enjoy it, but I think I was expecting to love it. I'm not going to rewrite history and say Kid Dan didn't have a good time watching this movie, because that would be an absolute rewrite of history. That would be a complete lie. But I remember we were walking back to the car with my auntie and uncle. My uncle, who was a big fan of the original trilogy, and my cousin. And maybe my sister, she might have tagged on, but she didn't like Star Wars. So maybe if she did, she will have slept through the movie, understandably. And we're heading to the car, and my uncle and my auntie are a few steps ahead of us, and we're talking, and I overhear my uncle say, "It wasn't very good, was it?" And my auntie being like, "No," and he's like, "Yeah, I guess it's for kids. It's never gonna hit the way when I saw the other ones when I was a kid. I guess they're for kids." And I remember thinking oh, they didn't like it. And it was almost like the answer to the question of why I didn't feel completely satisfied by the movie with all the excitement I had going into it. And I just think there is just a small disconnect, even for a child watching this movie. And I will never be able to explain what that disconnect was. Never. Because I can't go back to my younger self and really... It was too long ago to be able to ever really analyze and understand the feeling I had coming out of this movie. But I can intellectualize it to a degree now, as there are things in this movie that, spoiler alert, do not work. And maybe I didn't feel connected to the movie as a result of the things that didn't work. And this is all speculation, because I'll never know. And I couldn't articulate what it was. I couldn't articulate because on paper I'm going, there was action, it had a colourful, cast of interesting characters, there were lightsaber fights, Darth Maul is obviously an amazing character just visually, the music's great, there's a big pod race in the middle. Why, I don't think I will have been able to articulate even the thought, or even come close to the idea that having a bunch of ingredients that on paper seem good might not come together in the way you're hoping and create a cohesive whole. No way would young Dan have been able to express that. Do you know what I mean? So all I can do...
Yeah, and I think...
go on.
I just, it's tricky. I don't want to undermine anything, but your parents wouldn't take you, and you discovered that you weren't going to love everything for the first time ever. Is a podcast the forum where you should be talking about the Phantom Menace, Dan, or do you need to sit down with someone more professional than me and hash this out? Is all I'm saying. It's taking a rather dark turn, this podcast.
Well, at some point, every child at some point, every child has to have that moment when they watch something they don't like and go, "Oh, not everything that I consume is going to be gold." And I would have been what, 11, 12 at most. So it's that's the age to figure it out. That sometimes, and also I still don't think I came away completely I didn't walk away going, "That was shit." What was that Jar Jar Binks all about? I did. I then got this movie on video when it came out on video, and I watched it to death. I even had the novelization, which is when I finally started to actually understand what's going on in the movie properly. Once I read the novelization, that helped. I don't know. It's a hard one to explain, but I then remember by the time Attack of the Clones came out, I was much more aware of filmmaking, much more aware of storytelling, much more aware of things I didn't like, and even being able to articulate reasons I might not like them. And I remember coming out of Attack the Clones absolutely furious. because as much as this isn't a great movie, let me tell you, that one is a fucking mess. And I was in the perfect age to be cynical about Attack of the Clones as well. So that will have coloured my opinion at the time. But go on.
Yeah, and I will say, if anyone thinking, God, it's quite a dark joke Chris just made about Dad, I know that I can, do you know what I mean? Dad and I know each other well enough for me to say that. There's a reason I didn't curl up in a ball and start crying when Chris said that, because but you're not wrong though, is my point, I suppose. Yeah, I guess every kid has to have that moment, and mine was Phantom Menace. Who knew? I stretched mine out, I think. If I think back, the first time, the two experiences as a young person in the cinema that I remember being because as we've talked about on here before, going to the cinema was actually, still to this day, feels like quite a big deal for me, because we didn't have a local cinema for so long. Mm-hmm. So you had to travel to go to the cinema. Right. And I think Cats and Dogs was one. Yeah,
that movie sucked. Kid Dan knew that movie sucked pretty quick.
I was just and I'm slightly older with Cats and Dogs. And then the other one, as we've talked about on here before, was The Matrix Reloaded. Just sitting in the cinema going, oh shit.
So Cats and Dogs is 2 years after that. Is after Phantom Menace. Because I wonder as well. I will say this: doubt. I don't think any Matrix Reloaded is another year after that, 2 years after that. So it's two and two. But for me, I think what's interesting is I don't think anybody ever really has one singular moment that teaches them that lesson. I think you learn it slowly over a course of time. I'm not suggesting I walked out of Phantom Menace changed. Like, mother, I don't like all films anymore. It was, it's. But
that wouldn't bother your mum. They didn't want to take you anyway.
Yeah. Anything, well, once I got home, I was just a bit quiet. She was like, "What's wrong?" And I turned around. I've got a pipe and a paper, and I'm like, "I don't think I appreciate all films as I used to."
They high five. He's not going to be a nerd. How wrong they were.
Yeah. So I think these things happen slowly, right? But I definitely remember questioning how I felt coming out of this one. But I think the overriding thought was still enjoyment, I think, overall. Because, again, dumb kid, easily entertained. The movie didn't need to do a lot to keep me happy. And I do think that the people who really vouch for the prequels now grew up with it and just in many ways, let that nostalgia really cloud their feelings on it. Because whenever I've had a conversation with someone that's like a diehard prequel defender, they've never really been able to actually defend any of the criticisms of these movies, at least in the limited experience I've had speaking to a handful of people that I've met that are really passionately defend the prequels. They've only ever been able to say, yeah, but it's fun, or yeah, but it's dumb and it's supposed to be, or yeah, it's for kids, which are not, those aren't counters to the criticisms. Those are deflections of the criticisms that I don't think really address them. And look, if someone out there is listening to this and has honest answers to the criticisms that aren't deflections or pointing at a thing that does work, because all three of these movies have individual elements that work, and I will happily point to a scene and go, yes, pod racing is awesome, or yes, the scene with Palpatine and Anakin in the third one is great. But in the sort of space opera thing, menacing scene, really well done. But when I point out the things that don't work, they just move on. It's like it's a deflection or obfuscation. It's very rarely an actual defense of the thing that's being brought up. And if anyone has genuine defenses to the things that are regularly brought up to criticize these movies, please go head to YouTube. Nothing but Static UK. Find these videos, comment on them, or email us at mail@nothingbutstatic. I would genuinely love to hear them if people have them. So that's we'd sort of, unless you've got more to add on like our past feelings, because I worry we spent too long on that, because I had quite the rant, it turns out. Not even rant, like quite the monologue. How did you feel? How did you? Yeah, it's the start of my new one-man show. I've got a hole inside of my heart, and I don't know why, says Dan in 1990 walking out of Phantom Menace. That's the full title.
People would go.
It's going to be a great show, I promise. So my question then to you, Chris, is how did you feel watching it this time?
Well, I went into it very open. I'm not a defender of the whole prequel, but I've very consistently felt that this movie isn't that bad. Right. Even on the last big rewatch of all 9 movies I did. At the end of Phantom Menace, I remember turning to Jess and being like, I think that movie's fun. I have sort of, and maybe a bit of that is nostalgia. I went into it kind of going, I'm not worried about this one. I'm quite looking forward to watching it. Mm-hmm. And look, I don't know if it's how I went into it, but I had fun. I have fun with this movie. Like, and even more so at the beginning. Like, I'd forgotten about all like he uses a Jedi he uses a lightsaber to break through a door. Like, there's shit early on in this movie that I'm like, some of this shit's cool. Like, if you go from like the original trilogy to then seeing him break through a door with a lightsaber,
like, and not even break through, like sort of melt through slowly, like by holding it in.
Yeah. Like,
cool
that's some cool shit. And then they go to the underwater city, and that looks great. And like, I'm sat there watching it, and I don't mind the pod racing stuff. I think it, if we're talking headline opinions, I think it dips in the middle where they go off Naboo, and they really, there's a section of the movie that really is politics, and you don't, as you said, you kind of need a novel to fully get it. Like, you get it, but it's a bit dull, and so it lags in the middle, like before they return back to Naboo. But even then, when they return back to Naboo, like, all those action sequences are fine. Some of it's a bit cheesy. The special effects on some of the droid stuff, it doesn't, particularly hold up. But I'm like, there are 4 separate stories here, all of which I know what's happening. I understand what's happening. One of them has some particularly cool shit in it, which is, the lightsaber battle with Darth Maul is particularly good. I actually quite like, when they're like, oh, it's vital that whatever the MacGuffin is in space that they need to destroy, and then Anakin, starts to go to space. Although I don't think I'd kind of paid attention to how incredibly Star Wars that is, that there's some MacGuffin that needs to be destroyed on a spaceship. And like, as soon as that's said, I'm like, oh, of course, and Anakin's the one that does that. I think that's quite clever. Like, I think they do that bit of it well, in terms of getting Anakin up in space and him being the one to destroy it from the inside, and that sort of almost replicating that iconography from A New Hope, but doing it in a slightly different way. The Jar Jar Binks and those guys with the droid army is perhaps the fluffiest of all, but they're cut in between those four things enough to keep it interesting for me. So other than this sort of the particularly political bit in the middle, but even some of that stuff, and I think the movie, George, I know you think all Star Wars movies should end on a celebration and an upbeat note, and that feels very Star Wars. But fucking hell, do I think the film should have ended on, but did we kill the Master or did we kill the Apprentice? And then that shot of Palpatine, I was like, that's a fucking great moment. End it there. That's a bitchin' way to end the movie. Yeah, there's some good stuff here, and I had a lot of fun watching it. I'm not gonna lie. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt this one has the reputation like the most wrong, like of these three. Like its reputation is the most inaccurate. I don't think this is a terrible movie. I don't think this is a great movie for reasons we'll get into. But there's tons of good stuff in it, and I think we will find something I think to like in all three of these. I think it's gonna be interesting to see that when we finish these three, if it's this one or the third one I like best. But I would have been willing to take the bet on this one before coming into it, because I think this one is
did. I think we said that at the end of the last episode of the podcast. So.
Yeah, I think and because when you think about what a Star Wars movie is, and you sort of boil it down, this movie does accomplish it. It's got that sort of plot structure there's a goal, and then we watch the characters in sort of almost not real time, but like go from event to event, and each event leads into the next. It doesn't take place over a large period of time. We're not having gaps in all these characters' stories. They're together as a group in a situation, getting to a planet, then getting to another planet, then going back to where they started to sort of resolve the conundrum, this invasion of Naboo. And I don't think the movie it's structurally put together really well, but I don't think it manages to really. I do think it's doing too much, and I do think the fact that we're cutting between four different goals at the end of the movie is a fucking terrible choice, and it means you end up not caring that much about any of them because none of them get the attention they really deserve, and it makes the movie feel a bit schizophrenic towards the end. But I just think as a whole, as an adventure movie, we have our cast of characters. They escape a planet being invaded. When you boil this movie down, a planet gets invaded. The Queen and some protectors and a cast of characters leaves the planet. They land somewhere, but they've not got the parts to get the thing working. They want to get to the place where they can get help. They go to get the help. They're not going to get the help. So then they go. It's like the journey. The journey is the planet's being invaded. They want to stop it. They go on their trials and tribulations through Tatooine and Coruscant to try and acquire help to go resolve that issue. And in the end, they go back, having changed, and do it themselves. You will not be able to do that with Attack of the Clones. Boil it down to a simple, character arc or journey for the characters. And I don't believe we'll be able to do it for Revenge of the Sith. So when we think about, story structure, but also what, Lucas did with the original ones, this Phantom Menace is the closest of these three to the first three Star Wars movies. And I know people will dispute that because they're going, yeah, but there's the silliness of Jar Jar. I'm like, Ewoks. And all the politics. There's a whole scene at the beginning of one of the first Star Wars movies. I don't know if you heard of it. It's called A New Hope, where they're all sat around a table talking about how the Old Republic are dead. And it made no sense to me as a kid, and I ignored it. Now...
Yeah, but just to jump in here, and I'll probably repeat it when we talk about Revenge of the Sith, but obviously Revenge of the Sith is the one that's often pointed to for that. And there was a moment on a movie fights episode where someone was, I think they had to argue for the best one, and someone's going, yeah, but in Revenge of the Sith you get Darth Vader, and you get to see how Darth Vader was born, and then it lifts up, and it's this really amazing shot of the mask, and someone just undercut it with, yeah, you get to see Darth Vader, and then he goes, no!
Yeah.
Just
And
that
it's the
thing of
last
like the
it's the last like 5 minutes of the movie.
exactly.
That's the real problem. Is like the stuff that I always think of fondly from Revenge of the Sith, other than the weird opera scene where Palpatine is menacing. All the best parts of that movie are like all back end of that movie. It's front loaded with some real shite. But we'll come to that. So I think this one is the most sort of. It's got the most proximity to just like a traditional Star Wars adventure movie with its own plot, and it's even got the scene where they all sit round with the plans and figure out what everyone's gonna do to stop the problem. They sit around. They don't have they don't have the resources for a computer like hologram projection of what they're going to do, so they actually have like maps, but they sit around and they go, all right, you're going to go there and you're going to distract the larger army, we're going to go here, you're going to go destroy the droid control ship, and the Jedi are going to see if they can figure out this Darth Maul guy. Everyone has a goal, and like while I do think it's too many goals, they do that bit where they stop right before the final fight to explain what the conflict is about to be and what the goals of that conflict are for each individual group involved. And when you think back to like Return of the Jedi, where you've got like, you know what Han and Leia are trying to achieve on the planet, you know what Lando and Noob, whatever that guy's called, are trying to achieve up on the space battle, and you know what Luke is trying to achieve fighting Vader. The problem with this movie is they just throw in one piece too many. It's 4, not 3, and that's where it becomes unwieldy. But like, in terms of just like feeling like a Star Wars movie and having the rough structure and plot of a Star Wars movie, it's this one. I promise you, it's this one. Like in any way, like if you were able to reverse cook something and break it down to its components in real life, and I gave you like 3 pies, and one of them was supposed to be a simple steak pie, and you reversed the first one, and it was like steak, gravy, onion, and pastry, and then you reversed the next one, and it was like toothpaste, apple. Pastry, but like a different kind of pastry, one made out of like bread or something, like a really shit pastry. And then you broke down the third, it's all like all completely. That's what's happened here. Like when you break Phantom Menace down, it's the thing you think it should be. Does it all come together? No, not at all. And for reasons we'll talk about. The ultimate product resembles the steak pie you wanted it to, but it isn't quite right. It's not very nice.
Yeah, and I think,
but it is ultimately that. It's at least the thing you want it to be, unlike the next two.
Yeah, and I don't think Well, we haven't got there yet, but that's certainly how I feel going in. But I think, and, I don't think either of us are claiming this movie is perfect. I don't think either of us are claiming
absolutely not.
It's not got faults. But I don't think either of us are claiming particularly that. Bare minimum, the original trilogy, the original trilogy would be ranked above these. I don't think we're saying that at all, but you kind of, I think, with the prequels, have to start from a place of, well, fundamentally, did you at least sit and have fun? And I absolutely sit there and have fun with this movie. It's not a flawless movie by any means. Fuck me, are there too many screen wipes for one? Jesus, George. Like, do a standard tradition, my friend. This is insane.
He does love those. To be fair, they were used quite a lot in the original trilogy, to be fair. So I kind of like, he gets a pass. They're very commonly used in the original trilogy. He does love a good screen wipe, doesn't he? Bless him.
But, I absolutely have fun, and I agree with you. I was quite surprised because I've never watched it with necessarily a critical eye before.
Right.
But I was like, oh no, I think they do a good job, like you say, of the iconography of Star Wars, of the themes of Star Wars. I mean, in some cases, with a slight twist on it. All the stuff of Anakin, like this whole plot where you have someone referred to as the Chosen One, and you know that they're right, but you also know that they're wrong. Like technically, I guess he gives balance eventually.
It's a complicated journey, right?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of stuff to enjoy within that. So
there's an interesting thing where as well, and I will say this, people like Dave Filoni, who work on Star Wars stuff now, and Dave Filoni was very much heavily mentored by George Lucas, but also fan bases in general, have done a lot of let's say, generous rewriting of the themes and premises and ideas from these movies that I do not think are in the text. So a lot of people talk about how this movie, what's really happening in the end is this is a fight for Anakin, this fight with Darth Maul. And Qui-Gon goes into it knowing that the only way that Anakin's going to get trained is by going down. The same way, sort of, Obi-Wan let Luke see him go down because he knew it would inspire Luke, it would push Luke, it would bring Luke to where Luke needed to be. Because he sort of leads. If we think back to New Hope, Obi-Wan lets Darth Vader kill him. He sort of retreats. He sort of relaxes. He sort of stops defending himself properly, and then is taken down immediately and sort of disappears. We talked about that. The rewriting of history that happens in this movie, where people talk about that, and that Qui-Gon knew so confidently that Anakin was the one to save everyone, that he sacrificed himself because he knew that the sequence of events would follow his death would lead to Anakin being trained, and he'd had that denied. I'm going to just come out right now and say I think that's fucking bullshit. I don't think that was the intent. Qui-Gon does not gracefully let his guard and let himself die in front of Obi-Wan, which I think would have been very powerful, but he dies fighting and trying to defend himself, and if that was the intent, then Lucas fucked up in the way he shot it and directed it with the actors. So no, I'm going to come out right now and say I don't believe that was the intent of the sequence at all. And I think people adding to these movies to make them make more sense or make them work better has been a very common trait. And I do think the Clone Wars TV series does a lot to try and make the next movie function better than it did. And they did an admirable job. But you have to take the movie as it is when you're reviewing it like this. And no, that is not in the text or the subtext as far as I can tell of this movie. So no.
I'd agree with that. There's a lot of I think people also try and the weird discussion of the trilogy in recent years, and like you, I've tried to avoid too much of looking at that stuff until we're done, because I don't want it to cloud. But one criticism I remember specifically of this movie that people have debunked is the notion that it doesn't have a main character, and they've debunked that with it's absolutely Qui-Gon's movie. There is a main character, and I was just sort of watching this movie going, it feels like that's a criticism that has almost been one, I don't really remember people saying that. Particularly, and two, it almost feels like sometimes the discourse, and maybe I'm wrong and need to engage with it more after watching the three movies, but I feel like it as well as what you were just saying there of reading into it too much, there's also a little bit of latching on to things which aren't really criticisms because there's a defense for them. Do you know what I mean? It's the discourse around these movies and around The Last Jedi in particular has gotten really messy on what is actually a criticism, what isn't, what is being created as an argument so that there's a defense and all this sort of stuff.
I would say on the main character thing, I actually do think that is sort of an issue, because I think every character has a little mini sort of arc, but none of them are particularly thorough, in depth. There's no character. The closest you get is Qui-Gon. But I think, okay, let's go with that. Let's say that Lucas made Qui-Gon the hero of this piece, right? But he also gives him the Obi-Wan sort of mentor death. So is Obi-Wan the lead character of A New Hope? Or is the script really muddled, and it kind of made its protagonist the mentor type that then is destined to die, and kind of actually that was a mistake, and maybe Obi-Wan should have been the lead of this movie, because that's how
but Obi-Wan dies at the beginning of A New Hope. Qui-Gon dies at the end of this movie.
Obi-Wan dies at the end of A New Hope. Well,
is it the end of that
movie?
movie?
2/3. Yeah. So Luke's on Tatooine with Obi-Wan, and then they fly off to the Death Star, and then they run around the Death Star together, and then sort of at the end of the second act, Obi-Wan gets beat by Vader, and that then Luke comes back and blows up the place.
I just feel like we follow Qui-Gon more in this movie than we follow Obi-Wan.
Yeah, of course we do. Of course we do. But that doesn't change my criticism. My criticism is that's a mistake because Obi-Wan was there to be the mentor character, and his death meant something to our lead, to the character we're focusing on. And what we've done here is create a movie where it does feel like the character that is most likely to be quote-unquote our main character. And again, I think the movie does screw up by not really making a main character, and I do think that is the error. But if you're going to pick the character that the movie follows the most, just in terms of I'm going to go through this and mathematics, who are we following the most? Who is speaking the most? It's Qui-Gon. But then he's the character that dies. So he's the character.
No, but my point...
Go on.
My point in terms of following him the most is I don't think the fact that he dies at the end, he's just, to my mind at least, he's just a main character that dies at the end. I think because we have followed him the most, because we've spent the most time with him, because the whole movie is sort of about his decision making and whether he's right to put this faith in this boy and all of that sort of stuff, or at least that's a big part of the movie. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that's flawless. There are issues with that element of it, but I don't think it. He's just, for me, he's a character, a main character that dies at the end. I don't think it's not that he's there just to die, or even that if he was, that's an issue for me personally, because it is so far near the end of the movie and all that sort of stuff.
But to what end? What's the purpose of the death?
Well, like you say, it goes on to inspire Obi-Wan to actually mentor.
Well, no, I know, but as I said, I disagreed with that. Something other people have attached to the movie. I don't think that's what happens at all. I don't think he gives up himself to lead to that. I think it's horseshit. I think I don't think there is a main character, and Qui-Gon's death is positioned as a death that's supposed to inspire someone else. So the lead character of the movie is the guy that inspires someone else, not the guy. That's bad writing. That's just bad writing.
Yeah, I'm not. Dan, I'm not. Like I said, I'm not saying it's good writing. I'm just saying for me, it's. I think I do view him as a lead character, and I'm not bothered about the fact that he dies to inspire someone else at the end.
But I just think
if you're not an issue for me.
Yeah, no, I understand it, but I'm just saying from a screenwriting perspective. If you want to build to your lead character dying, that is absolutely fine. That is a valid choice. There are many movies where the lead character perishes at the end of the movie, but it usually means something within the context of that movie. And here, the closest we can come to making that mean something is that it means something for the next movie rather than for this movie. And I think that is part of the problem, because it all feels disconnected, because Qui-Gon's death is in no way related to the victory on Naboo. He is separately,
which is why I think
he is separately on Naboo fighting a different threat to the one everyone else is fighting.
Yeah, which is why I think that ending is so juxtaposing as well.
Mm-hmm.
We just should end on, because that would make it have maybe a bit more weight. We should just end on Qui-Gon's death instead of this weird, we do Qui-Gon's death and then we cut back to the happy championship ending, which we seem to need to have in the first movie of a Star Wars trilogy.
But also,
even though there are still, issues out there.
And also, if he's the main character, right, and we're just doing that based on the role, the count of words and scenes, who we're following the most, what's his arc? What's Qui-Gon's arc? If the arc of if the main character goes on the journey, what's his journey?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't. Do you know what I mean? I'm not staunchly because it is as I said all along, it is flawed. I'm not staunchly defending it. I'm just saying.
What I'm saying is, if we're going back to your original point of, you don't think the criticism that there's no main character is a problem, I'm saying it very much is, because the only character that comes close to representing a main character has no arc and dies for nothing related to this movie. And I think if that's if that's the closest thing you can pin to a main character for this movie, something's gone horribly wrong. I think that's actually one of the more valid criticisms of this film, because I just think it's true. There isn't a main character. There really isn't. There's nobody going on this journey. The gang generally are this like group of misfits, but the person who gets the most screen time has absolutely zero character arc.
Yeah. Do you not think it's tied with all the sort of debates on what to do with Anakin? The fact that, you know, the Jedi Council could originally conclude that he shouldn't, you know, be mentored, and then, you know, by the end, after his death, they're like, all right, fine. Although even that is very weakly written, because you're kind of like, but why? Like, in a way, you're almost wrapping this decision up with someone's death. That's even more reason not to do it.
Yeah,
so it is poor, thinly written, shall we say?
Yeah, and because that's the thing is, like, if we're going by that logic, like his character arc is he meets a child and he goes, this child should be trained. And at the end, after he's died, when he doesn't even get to like see that go through, they go, yeah, I guess we'll train that child out of respect or whatever because he died. Like, that's not an arc for his character. That's nothing. That's, you know, it's a random sequence of events where after he died, they decided to give him the Oscar that they weren't going to give him originally, because he died. Heath Ledger.
I was gonna say, wow, like we're already saying good things about the Phantom Menace. Do we want to really piss off the internet this episode?
Look, I have never said Heath Ledger didn't deserve the Oscar. He was just not going to get it. And then he was going to get it. And he was going to get it because he died. There's no way the Academy give him that Oscar in a world where he survived. Not in a million years. He deserved it. It was a great performance.
What are some other criticisms that you either think are valid or noticed yourself on this watch?
I mean, the humor. Let's talk about the humor. A lot of people talk about the humor. Jar Jar, the slapstick humor. I, on this viewing, found it quite hit or miss. And that is a problem. We go from, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a good example of like Jar Jar making me laugh. Which he did once or twice. I'm trying to think of an example of it though. I'm struggling. Oh, I don't mind him being rude at the table and Qui-Gon grabbing his tongue and being like, don't do that again. That's funny. I like that scene because it is annoying what he's doing, and Qui-Gon points it out, and that's good. I'm on board with that. I like it. I think that's funny. I'm less interested in he gets his tongue made numb and he gets his hand trapped in the thing, and then a like sort of weird alien dinosaur thing farts at him and he goes, Piusa! All that stuff can go in the bin. I don't mind comedy in a Star Wars movie. I think there should be comedy in a Star Wars movie. I think that's almost essential to a Star Wars movie. But it's almost... I just think this sort of slapsticky fart joke humor is like the wrong sort of humor. Like, when you think back to the original trilogy and, like, you know, aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? I don't get in there. I don't care what you smell. You know, all those sort of lines that are funny from the first movie. They're based in dialogue and they're based in, like, the situation. It's not like there's a situation happening and then someone does a fart. Like, I don't know. Like, there are moments Jar Jar makes me laugh, but it's pretty hit or miss because often I think the tone of the humor is juxtaposed too much with the rest of the movie, and I think that's particularly evident. I got it out in the last act when we've got three pretty serious fights going on, and then we got Jar Jar Mr. Beaning through a wall, which I think undercuts the seriousness of the danger. Because I think it's really cool, this plot that they have with the Gungans, where it's like at the beginning of the movie, the Gungans go on more of an arc than Qui-Gon. The beginning of the movie, the Gungans are like, no, the Naboos, they think we're better than us, and what happens to them won't affect us. We're hidden down here, we're safe down here, let them suffer. And then at the end of the movie, they've been displaced, and then the people of the Queen of Naboo bows to their boss, and they decide, no, we're willing to play our part, and our part will mean sacrifice. There's this great moment when someone says, if you do this plan, you may lose Gungans. People will die. And he's like, yeah, we're prepared to make a sacrifice for the greater good of both the races that live previously in peace on this planet. That's a brilliant arc for that character, for a character that's got so little screen time, Boss Nass. So why am I not feeling the seriousness of the threat to the Gungans? Because all of the scenes that are their fight is just Jar Jar blundering around comedically, getting a gun attached to his leg and accidentally shooting things, or dropping a bomb that accidentally blows a thing up. And the first time you do it, you go, okay, yeah, that's kind of funny. But it's like every scene is Jar Jar accidentally beating the enemy. What are we doing? It's too much. And I think it's supposed to harken back to like the slightly more comedic Ewoks using their traps on the stormtroopers in Return of the Jedi. The problem is, though, the difference is the Ewoks have a real plan, and they're being real strategic and real sneaky, and they're like deliberately like outsmarting the stormtroopers. And you believe that that the stormtroopers might be able to be outsmarted, even if they've got the superior firepower, because they've not been proven across the movies to be very intelligent. I less believe that every single time Jar Jar drops something, it happens to explode in just the right place to take out the enemy. Do you know what I mean? It becomes less believable.
I'm with you. I think that's the big problem with Jar Jar. I actually don't find him that irritating as a character. I just find the repetitiveness and the coincidence of him blundering his way into success really weird and just a bit like, it just gets old. It's just a bit dull. It's just a bit like, okay, yeah, we just, every time I think it's why it's the weakest element, as well as, to some degree, the graphics not holding up and all that stuff. I think in a way that the reason that battle is the weakest element of the sort of 4 stories that we're following at the very end. One of the reasons that's the weakest is because it's like whenever we cut back to that field, I'm like, okay, Jar Jar's going to do something stupid that is actually going to work. Cool. And I struggle, although it's a compelling theory, and I've watched the videos a few years ago and enjoyed the whole was Jar Jar a Sith Lord stuff. I think it wasn't. I think potentially it's another example of retrospectively trying to make a square fit a circle.
And also, I think misunderstanding a quote from George Lucas as well. Like they're in a meeting about the visual effects. And he says Jar Jar is the key to all this, meaning like if we can make Jar Jar work on screen, we'll get away with a lot. As long as Jar Jar, the character that's in the movie the most, CGI-wise holds up. That's what he means. But of course, if you snip out Jar Jar is the key to all this, it makes...
Yeah, but I think like since people have posed it as a question to him, and he's been a bit like, and of course he's going to do you know what I mean? Like, of course he's gonna like be a bit playful, or like he's got nothing to lose, and if it implies that these movies that have been heavily criticisms, that he's been accused of destroying people's childhoods, if you've been accused of destroying someone's childhood with something, and then there's an idea that people like, and they come to you and go, was it this? Of course your instinct is potentially, I'm not George Lucas, I don't know for sure, but it feels like your instinct in that moment would be to go, no, that's what I was doing. Yeah, that's right. Yep, cool.
But also, it's been interesting because I'm sure I went through that edgy phase in my early 20s where I was like, yeah, George Lucas screwed my childhood. He's worse. Like whatever. Adult Dan very much thinks like he built the tower of Lego bricks. He's perfectly welcome to knock it down. It was his to start with.
Oh, for sure. Oh yeah. I think it's
and also I think it's him doing that doesn't take away the fun time I had with the build, like, you know what I mean, like doing it. So like the original movies haven't gone anywhere. Well, to be fair, actually, technically they have. That is worse. That's the bigger crime. I am more on board with shitting on George Lucas for the changes he's made to the original trilogy than I ever will be for the prequels, which I can quite happily ignore should I want to.
Well, especially because, like, he didn't He didn't take away your childhood. And, like, the only people that could potentially say anything about his impact on their childhood is the people that watched these films as children. And by all accounts, by and large, there seems to be a movement suggesting that they enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Mad. But yeah, back to Jar Jar.
I do think he's incapable of writing, and these movies. We'll talk about his writing in a minute, but his screenwriting skills are the biggest problem, I think. He has several quirks, even as a director as well. He's not a great director of actors, but we'll come back to that too. But he could probably work around that if the scripts were stronger, I think.
Well, that's because I got nothing but other than I sort of, like I say, completely agree with you that I don't think. Well, I know you didn't say this bit, but for me, Jar Jar as a character isn't necessarily that irritating. But it's the fact that we just do the same thing with him throughout.
Yeah, and
sort of blundering into success, especially in the third act, is really irritating.
Yeah, and
that is irritating, but it's not. Yeah.
And the Clone Wars TV show proves there's a way to do that creatively. Like, they've got an episode called Bombad Jedi, where Jar Jar accompanies Amidala to a planet that's I think a separatist planet, and they kidnap her because they don't know Jar Jar came with her, and he ends up in a robe for just comedic reasons, and they think he's a Jedi, and they start running scared because they think there's a Jedi after them, but it's just Jar Jar blundering around. And the episode's brilliant. It's only 10 minutes, so it doesn't have... Maybe it's 20. I think it's a 20-minute episode. But, so obviously it doesn't have... Oh, maybe it is only 10. I can't remember. But it's a 10 or 20-minute episode. But, it doesn't have a huge amount of time to repeat the joke too many times, number one. But number two, they do keep finding new and creative ways for Jar Jar to accidentally appear like a Jedi. A thing sort of seeming to float around him, or the glow of a lightsaber, but it's not really a lightsaber. Whatever, different... I can't remember the exact nature of the misunderstandings that lead to everyone thinking Jar Jar is this really dangerous Jedi. But it's a really funny episode, and it's one of the best uses of Jar Jar post... it's one of the best uses of Jar Jar, because obviously, this movie doesn't quite get it right. But I think it's not about Jar Jar. I think it's just about Lucas knowing there needed to be humor in the movie, but when it came down to the script writing, only really being able to come up with mostly quite puerile, repetitive jokes that are the problem. So it's not necessary. I'm happy for there to be a comedic sidekick. We had C-3PO in the first three movies flapping about because he thought, flapping because he thought there was one of those bat things flapping around his head, and he panicked, when they were inside the big worm in the second one. And, C-3PO getting torn to bits in... is that from a deleted scene? No, it's in the actual movie, isn't it? When in Empire, when C-3PO gets turned into loads of bits, and then Chewbacca grabs all of his bits and runs, and he has C-3PO's torso and head almost like a backpack, so C-3PO can see behind him, and he's yelling at him and calling him an idiot as Chewbacca runs around with him. That's funny. That's really funny. We have had comic relief characters within the context of these movies, so Jar Jar is not at all a broken concept. Jar Jar is just the victim of Lucas not really knowing how to inject humor into this in a natural way. And that's such a shame, because both Empire and Return of the Jedi, and to an extent less so, because it was, I think that's because it's one of the ones written by Lucas, New Hope maybe had the least functional humor in it, but it didn't try to that much, so it got away with it. Whereas, this movie is just trying all over the place to be funny, and it's mostly getting it quite wrong. I think Jar Jar's not the problem. The attempts at humor are the problem, and unfortunately, as the comic relief character, that often falls at the feet of Jar Jar. But I think it's led to a sort of misunderstanding of the problem by viewers that's led to a Jar Jar's the problem sort of narrative that I don't buy. I think in a better script, Jar Jar's a fun character that everyone loves.
Yeah, and as I sort of talked about earlier, I think one of the other big script issues is the density of the politics.
Yes.
I think the notion of seeing Palpatine manipulate the system is a good one, and actually a really good idea, and quite an interesting, but. It's sort of like you say, as a kid, you needed a novel to fully understand it.
I did.
And I think that we don't. It's not like every scene. It's clear what Palpatine is doing and why. And maybe you can make an argument of, oh yeah, but not realizing his plan right. But no, I think for what this movie is, that should be clearer, and just some of those Senate scenes, and I don't think it's as big a part of the of this movie in particular as some people accuse it of being or remember it being. Although I think as an element it's talked about more in certainly Attack of the Clones, if memory serves. But I think those scenes, you just lose interest in those scenes. We've had the excitement of the pod racing and all that sort of stuff, and we're about to go into this big battle. But at that point, we don't even know we're going into a big battle. We don't know where things are leading, and it's just all tied up in this nonsense of like there's a scene where he names the other people he's up against, and it's just so unnecessary. It's like, you've made it clear from the visuals and other scenes that this is a complex political world. If you're just naming other people and naming other senators that he's against for presidency or whatever it is, it's just pointless. It just doesn't need to be there. It's that kind of classic. I'm sure that's interesting to you, George, because in your head, you've potentially mapped out who those other names are. Or maybe there's extended universe stuff that already existed at this point with these other people. I don't know. But to the viewer just viewing this movie, it's just wasted dialogue that doesn't add to the political spectrum of the world. And I think that that portion of the movie for me is when that highlights another clear problem with the script, which is just the political stuff being too dense and dull.
Yeah, and I think I don't even think that section is necessarily the problem. I think it's throughout the entire movie. The movie opens with it. I mean, one of the first lines of dialogue breaks one of my most hated screenwriting cliches, which is when a character says, "as you know," and then says a thing that the person knows because the audience don't know it yet, and the screenwriter was too lazy to think of a way to naturally have the information come up. So they have them repeat the thing. It'd be like me going, "Chris, as you know, this is a podcast where we review old movies." And I was only doing it to tell our listeners, because you do know. I don't need to tell you. So, and it's literally one of the first lines of the movie. One of the viceroys says, "As you know, our blockade is perfectly legal." Okay. Because here's my question, dear viewer, dear listener, in this case, sorry. Okay, the blockade is legal, but then the occupation of Naboo is illegal. And if Amidala signs a treaty, they can have it ratified by the Senate because they've got someone inside the Senate. Wouldn't it be simpler just to start the movie with them invading and not worry about trade disputes and blockades and treaties? Can't it just be as simple as they've invaded and she needs to go get help from the government? Why? What? I know why we overcomplicate the Palpatine thing. That's a wider plot about a man manipulating a political system that is very relevant to the next movie and the one after. So we sow those seeds now. Fine, George. No problem. Fill your boots. But it's that on top of a bunch of needless complication at the beginning of the movie about signing treaties and blockades and what's been ratified by the Senate, when it could just be as simple as the Trade Federation invade Naboo, the Senate have gotten wind something's going on, so they've sent the Jedis to investigate, and the Trade Federation just don't want the Jedi to leave and tell the Senate it's real. That is way simpler than trade blockades and treaties and ratification and inside men at the Senate. And all of that is just nonsense. That's just chuffer surrounding what could be a much simpler plot. Like, even as a kid, I was just like, they're just needlessly confusing. Not even confusing, just needlessly complicated and overwrought. Like, it's just overwritten. It's just, let it be that they've invaded. It's fine. It's fine, George. The reason they get away with it through a lot of the movie, though, is they do pepper in all of those. I think the reason the middle section stands out over the other sections of the movie where they do a lot of overt politics tends to be, at least in my experience, because they then follow it up with an action scene. The Jedi come for their meeting, then they're having a big fight in the hallways with the droids and stuff. They get on Naboo, there's a lot of talk of treaties, but then the Jedi are there to save Amidala, and there's an escape. Every time the movie stops to do politics stuff for most of the movie, they usually then go, here's a shiny thing to look at, so you don't have to worry about it. Don't think about it. There's fighting happening. It's all good. The only point in the movie they don't immediately follow up political stuff with an action beat is the political stuff on Coruscant. So that stands out as being particularly dull because they don't at least then dangle. They don't it give us the joy then of just dangling some shiny cool stuff at us. And I think that's why it stands out. But it is throughout the entire movie, and it is often just on a script writing level, completely needless. This script needed so many rewrites, and absolutely, I'm sorry, screenwriting sin, basic 101, never use the words "as you know," because if you use those words in your script, you have failed on every fucking level as a writer. And it's the first, it's like this, it's like the second spoken line of the entire movie, I think.
Well, speaking of over-explaining in the script as well, and a sense of, no, we don't need that. Midichlorians. Like, just have him sense that the Force is strong in him, and just, I don't think we need midichlorians, and I don't think we need Anakin to not have a father either, and be this, like, it's not adding anything, George, like, it's not doing anything. Like, maybe it doesn't matter who the father is, or maybe it's, because I don't think now, obviously, it would be latched onto as a big, who's the father? But I don't think then it would have been, like, if they just didn't address, his father. Mm-hmm. I just feel like it's a question that's in the script because you've put it in the script. Like, right. I don't think anyone would have thought anything of them just not discussing who his father was, and just quite it would have made all all the flaws we've talked about in terms of Qui-Gon and the end and all that stuff. Imagine if one of his points was like, no, I can feel it, and he's the only one that can feel how strong, or that can really feel or really believe in how strong the Force is within this guy. Why does it need to be a fucking blood sample? Like digitally transferred to Obi-Wan to look at in the ship, and then all this stuff about midichlorians potentially creating him and all this. It's just needless. It's not, you're answering a question that you've asked, but the audience aren't going to. So yeah, it just doesn't need to be there at all.
Yeah, I do feel like there's the biggest crime. There are crimes within this script for that, and that is what you've just. I mean, like, yeah, they're answering a question didn't need answering. I don't know why because I think if like that is a real, like, if that was going to be a big plot hole, then you could sort of go, well, you had to do midichlorians because you needed to figure out the parentage of this kid or whatever. But as you said, no one watching this movie would have questioned it. The dad died young. They're slaves. They were snatched from the dad. Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's literally irrelevant. The script raises the question and goes, oh shit, yeah, I've got to answer that, and like, that's pointless, absolutely stupid. I 100% agree with you. But then there's the wider problem with midichlorians, which is just stripping all the mysticism out of the Force and making it science. And look, I love science. Science is how we should, how we should make many of our decisions as a society, not on just the whims of people with a feeling. But in a fantasy world with space wizards, I am very happy for the Force to remain a mystical, almost religious, well, not almost, a literally religious thing that some are sort of gifted with the ability to sort of commune with in some way, or experience, or understand, or sort of feel the vibrations within. Like, I'm perfectly happy to feel that the Force is just this mysterious thing that they don't really understand. Because here's the problem, I think, as well, is it's not just the explanation of the Force, it's that it's backwards. Because in the past, we understood it scientifically, not the future. It's the wrong way round. If in Luke's time, by then they were like, oh, we scienced the Force to death and we understand it now and it's midichlorians. But in the old days, they really looked at it like a religion. They didn't understand it yet. It's this weird regression that happens where, like, in Obi-Wan's youth, everyone understood the midichlorians was like a science thing and the Force is a science thing. And then that same character gets older and Luke's like, tell me about the Force. And he's like, oh, well, it's just a spiritual thing. It's, it penetrates us, it binds us. And it's like, wait a minute. This is the wrong way around. Whereas if youth Obi-Wan thought that, and then old Obi-Wan went, you know what, we looked into it in the end and it turns out it's science. Like, that would make more sense to me. So it kind of like, it kind of breaks it. I just think, like, it's the Doctor Who thing of some things just need to be left to the mystery. I don't need an explanation for everything that happens in these movies, and I don't need a scientific reason why space wizards can be wizards. I've never wondered what makes Gandalf able to do magic in Lord of the Rings, and nor have the Lord of the Rings books ever told me why Gandalf can do magic. Magic exists in the world. The Force exists in this one. As long as it sticks and works within its own rules, I do not need it explaining. I've never needed it explaining. It does nothing but harm, and it doesn't gain anything as well. And this is what I was talking about earlier with that. If it explained a plot hole or it made sense of something, I kind of go, I've kind of got to sit through this because it does at least explain this, or it does at least give me a juicy story beat with this. But it adds nothing to this story. It's a needless retcon too. That's what's really painful. It's the same reason I think a lot of people don't react very well to the Doctor Who, the Timeless Child thing. If you don't know about that, don't worry about it. But what you as an example, it's a change to the lore that they then don't do anything with on a storytelling basis. The script then never uses that to generate any interesting drama or character work or anything. It's just sort of a thing that is now true for literally no gain. I can't fathom why you would make the backstory of something worse for no gain in the present, at the very least. Do you know what I mean? It is just literally throwing your money away, throwing your storytelling cachet away for no reason. So yeah, I think midichlorians are deeply stupid, and this script works even better without them, because then you really do. Because that's the other thing that pisses me off so much about them. He has scientific proof this kid is magic, and extra so, more so than the other wizards. He literally, Obi-Wan says this sentence. Even Master Yoda doesn't have a midichlorian count this high. That sentence is in this fucking movie. So then he brings the kid in front of the Jedi Council and they go, nah. They scienced it. They know. He proved it. Why are we debating this?
Well, no, as established, Dan, they go, nah, and then they go, Qui-Gon's dead. Oh, all right then. Bye.
Yeah, it actually makes this movie worse as well. Even if you want to disagree with me on the lore stuff and say the lore is fine. Okay, fine. Let's say you like that midichlorians explain the Force. It makes this movie worse because now I don't understand why the Jedi Council make the decisions they make. Whereas if Qui-Gon believed in his fucking soul, in his heart of hearts, just because he's so connected to the spiritual side of what he does, that kid is the chosen one, and he brings him in front of the council, and they don't feel it. It's going to make him question his faith or feel it even harder. He's going to double down. Then Qui-Gon has more of an actual arc because his own religion doesn't see something he sees so clearly. He's a misunderstood prophet at that point, right? But instead, it's politics again. Space wizards are stuck in politics, and I know ultimately that does become a theme, that the downfall of the Jedi is ultimately the politicking rather than being space wizards. I do get that is where it goes, but I don't think George knew that yet. So I'm just sat here watching the movie going, like, you could make this movie make more sense if you just took the midichlorians out, or at least I'd more be invested, or at least understand why they don't just go, yeah, we'll train him. I mean, he was literally born of the Force and has a midichlorian count so high even this little green dude doesn't match him. That we should at least study it, even if we don't train it. And yes, I did call Anakin Skywalker it in that scenario. But like, I just as a virgins in the Force, proven with science, their decision making makes no sense. And that is like, it would make so much more sense if you just made it a mystical thing, which is what it should have been. And I don't understand. Very confused. Midichlorians on all fronts for me. Make them go away, please.
Did you continuing the script, and then I think we'll tackle the acting. But continuing the script, do you think that? Because I can remember as a kid being surprised by the twist involving Padme, and I watched this film as an adult, going, but it's obviously Natalie Portman. Why was that a surprise? Do you think the script handles that twist badly? Do you think actually the script does it well, but just the fact that it's so clearly Natalie Portman, or maybe at the time it wouldn't have been? What's your view on Padme and the decoys and all that sort of stuff?
I think the problem now is that obviously Natalie Portman is a very famous actress. And I think, I think some of the reason now it feels so embarrassingly obvious is because why else would you have cast Natalie Portman in the role of the handmaid?
Well, and you recognise her face so much because
right.
it doesn't feel as hidden behind the makeup or anything, because you're like, well, that's Jane. Like,
yeah, and I will say, look, and I will say, Keira Knightley and Natalie Portman do look extraordinarily similar. And in the scenes where Natalie Portman is in the makeup, which is more than you probably think, they do look extremely similar, to the point where Keira Knightley's mother couldn't always tell on set which was her daughter, and that is quite funny. That is just objectively funny. So I actually think the script handles it okay. I don't think it's massively secret, but I also don't think it's like jaw-droppingly obvious. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. It's subtle enough that I think a kid, or maybe someone only sort of like, someone not like analyzing every word of every scene probably would be gone, oh, okay, it's a decoy thing, or maybe someone who's like very storytelling orientated would know it doesn't really make sense if the Queen is so essential to this story. Why are we spending so much time with her handmaid instead of her? It obviously is a proper like Jasmine out in Agrabah situation where she wants to see the world a bit, so she's done a switcheroo to get out of the castle. Sort of that's that situation. No one telling me they figured it out immediately would surprise me, but I also perfectly makes sense to me that people wouldn't have bought it because it isn't exactly completely on Front Street. There's some really nice subtle nods to it, like and well, some people will criticize me for calling these subtle, but I thought they were reasonably subtle. Like when Qui-Gon's making the bets and she's like, the Queen wouldn't approve, and he's like, well, the Queen's not here. Like, I thought those moments were quite fun. They're fun when you don't know, and they're fun when you know. So yeah, and I guess also it's just a little bit spoiled now by obviously Natalie Portman famously playing the Queen. Like, she famously played that character. And we're now very familiar with what that actress looks like, so there isn't really any disguising it. The other thing that I will want to point out, and I've always thought this, Chris, I don't know if like on my very, very first viewing, but through most of my teenage years, I've always been scratching my head about this. The character's called Padme Amidala, yes? That's her name.
Mm-hmm.
Queen Amidala. Padme Amidala. She does a switcheroo with her handmaid, and someone says to the handmaid, what's your name? She goes, Padme. Correct me if I'm wrong, that's your name. That's the same name as the Queen. Yeah. It's not a great disguise. If you're gonna tell me your real name, if I was Queen, I'll be Queen. I'll be Queen Doolan. If I was Queen Doolan and I just switched with my handmaid, and they were like, "What's your name?" I'm like, Dan. They're like, "Well, that's funny. That's Queen Doolan's first name." Yeah, real coincidence. Why does she say her name is Padme and that's her real name? It's not a great disguise.
It's not helped. I'm just trying to flick to the scene. Do you think it's not helped by the fact that when it is revealed, my memory, and I need to check this, my memory, here we go, I've got it here. My memory is that even Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are like, whoa!
Yeah, I know.
Like, if there was a bit more... in that reveal there was a bit... There was a bit more of a knowing, like, yeah, we knew. Or, that makes sense. And
mate, that would have made it so much better. Because I watched it with Nadia, and Nadia said exactly this. She was like, "Oh, does Qui-Gon know?" And I'm like, "He must do, right? He's just being playful because he knows what she's done. And he's putting up with it, like, because she's the queen or whatever." But there's a real shot where they like look at each other like, "Whoa," it's real like surprise from Qui-Gon over. It's a very quick shot, but it is absolutely there. Yeah, if I'm in the editing room, I'm absolutely removing that shot, and maybe even if I can, replacing it with Qui-Gon looking a bit smug because he knew. Because I think the whole movie plays better if he knew the whole time. But the movie does not intend that to be the case for sure. Because as you correctly remembered, there is a shot that shows that he did not know that was coming, which breaks my brain and also makes them look really incompetent, in my opinion.
Yeah. So let's talk acting. Who do you think's given the best performance, Dan?
Oh, easy. Ewan McGregor, all the way. Bish bash bosh.
Yeah.
Loving you. Qui-Gon's great too. Liam Neeson.
I was going to say, I think Liam Neeson's all right as well.
But he didn't have as many. He got to create a character from scratch. Ewan McGregor had to give a performance that felt his, but also honoured a beloved, classical English actor giving one of his most iconic performances. He had to both be Alec Guinness and Obi-Wan, but also make it his own. That is a fucking tough task, and he's so good. He's so good. How is it this good? He's the best thing about this whole trilogy. Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan. 100%. Not even close. I love him. Genuinely. It's so good. I don't know. Who did you... Who stood out for you? I assume, because, I guess that is the safe answer. That is the boring answer. Ewan McGregor.
Liam Neeson, I thought gave a really strong performance. It's talked about a lot, but the scene where he pauses before the red laser doors in the scene at the end, his sort of unwavering faith in Anakin, and even the subtle stuff like his reaction in the scene where I don't know the character's name, but the character who owns Anakin and his mum, in the scene where he tries to use Watto, where he tries to use a Jedi mind trick on Watto, and Watto doesn't. Watto's like, your Jedi, what do you think? You're some kind of Jedi? Mind tricks don't work on me. And
aren't you gonna do the voice? Hey, it's Watto!
No.
You're not going to do Watto's voice?
No. I'm not going
Watto, I can't, I know people have accused Watto of being like a really unfortunate stereotype of a Jewish person, but I can't get over the idea that Watto sounds a lot like Animal from the Muppets. That's where I struggle. Animal, drum! Like, it's the same voice.
I think his subtlety of we know that's irritated him slightly, but he doesn't give a look where if you're Watto. It's something we talk about a lot and praise actors that can do this.
Yes.
Actors that can sell something to the audience without selling it to the characters. Because bad acting is and you go, how do the people in the room not fucking? How does that character not go? Well, hold on, you look annoyed at that. Are you a jet? But the fact that in that moment, it's a very small moment, but Neeson gives a performance where we know that's irritated him, but Otto wouldn't necessarily know. So I think there's a lot of subtleties and nuances to both his and McGregor's performance. So I think obvious answer, but I think those are the standouts in terms of strong performances, which means Dan. Who's doing the weakest performance? Oh, and the guy, it's worth shouting out as well. The guy playing, don't know his name, but the guy playing Palpatine as well.
Ian McDermott. Good. Yeah, he's great, and he's doing a lot. Yeah, because he's another one that's like juggling like 8 different things. Yeah, Ian McDermott's great. Look, I think I also want to shout out Natalie Portman, obviously, but if we're just doing the good ones before we get to the not great ones, Penella August, who plays Shmi Skywalker, Anakin's mum, also wonderful job. She's, that's a hard role, like, because she's got to be so. You've got to believe her in like both beaten down slave status, but also this almost implausible and almost stupid level of hope she has for the future. This optimism that undercuts what she's talking about. Like, that she does believe one day Anakin will achieve something, that they'll be out of this place, that things will be better. And that's not in the script. That's all in her performance. It's great. She does a really good job. So yeah, that's if we're doing the tippity top. I think they're great. I would actually also like to shout out Ahmed Best. I think, considering the material, he does as good as anyone is ever going to do with the script he was given for Jar Jar. Thumbs up for Ahmed Best, also doing a great old job. I think if we're going down to the less good end, let's briefly mention Terrence Stamp. I know he didn't care for this movie in the end, and he was annoyed that he was acting against a picture of Natalie Portman on a wall instead of actually against Natalie Portman. I get it, buddy. I do, but suck it up. Do you know what I mean? Suck it up. He also repeatedly apparently moaned about his pay. So they promised him a gift, and then they sent him a Star Wars stencil set for children. That's worth like $4. He got a personal gift from George Lucas, and it was that. So yeah, Terrence Stamp, not giving a great performance here. Maybe that's not his fault. Maybe it was crap that he had to perform not to an actual actor for his scene, and that's sad. But I honestly think, and I'm going to get shit for this, I really am. I'm so sorry, everyone, but the worst performance in this movie by quite some distance for me is Samuel L. Jackson. I'm sorry.
No, really, you think? I was surprised at how barely in this movie he is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, first of all, he's barely in the movie, number one. But two, he's like cartoon levels of annoyed at Qui-Gon for bringing this kid in front of him. He's like basically rolling his eyes. It's so bad. What's happening? Was he drunk that day? One of the greatest actors. Who doesn't love Samuel L. Jackson? And I've never noticed it before. He's terrible in this movie. He's so bad. Watch his scene again. Anyone who's listening to me right now, thinking I'm crazy, just go watch the scene where no, not the scene where they bring Anakin in. But the scene where Obi-Wan goes into, like, the earlier one, where Obi-Wan goes in to sort of make the case for them training Anakin, it's like, it's really bad. It's so bad.
There must have been you got to imagine. Yeah. There must have been because this is not, this is only a few years after Pulp Fiction. So, Samuel L. Jackson is the man at this point. He's the guy. You've got to imagine there's a conversation where Lucas is going, I will give you something to do in the next two movies. If you could just, we'll build it. If you could just sort of sit there looking annoyed as a kid names things that are on a screen, that would be great. And then you'll get more to do in 2 and 3, I promise.
I mean, in that scene, I guess he's fine. And then he kind of looks over skeptically to Yoda to be like, tell this kid to go fuck off. But it's the scene when I genuinely wrote in my notes, Mace Windu could not have been clearer on how sick of Qui-Gon's shit he is. It's just so overacted. He really doesn't know what movie he's in. Now, my memory is he's much better in the next two movies when he's got a bit more of a part. And I don't know if they've figured out what Mace Windu's character was yet. And he's fine in the very last scene, where he has that exchange with Yoda. So not everything's going to be getting knocked out the park. But yeah, Christ, it's rough in that scene with Qui-Gon. It's really bad. I know everyone wants me to say Jake Lloyd, but Jake Lloyd is a child, and he's doing a pretty good job for a child. I'm not giving Jake Lloyd any shit. He's, also, not only is he a child, but he has to deliver lines like, "Are you an angel?" Which no one is saying naturally. So anyone wants to give Jake Lloyd shit, come through me, because fuck off. Grow up.
Yeah. The dialogue of that in particular, is something like, "Are you an angel? I hear they live on spaceships." Sorry, what? What's happening here?
You know, they made him audition with that scene, and I saw the auditions, and it's fucking dreadful. And all three kids who I saw do that in the auditions in the documentary, embarrassing. Just really, like, they're all bad. So yeah, fuck off.
Yeah, I don't think I'm with you. I don't think it's Jake Lloyd's fault. I think he wasn't given great material, and he's really like like you can tell he's going for it and trying, like the pod racer scenes, and I don't know what he was actually doing during the pod racer scenes. But he's going for it in terms of a kid, like, you know, pretending he's on a pod racer and all that sort of stuff.
I think the only real times he comes across a bit stilted is like usually when he's in like a dialogue scene with really clunky dialogue, like, because it proves that thing. It's like, it's exactly, look, Carrie Fisher nailed it with the original trilogy. You can write this shit, but you can't say it. Like how, like Alec Guinness, one of the most respected, established performers all time, thought those scripts were absolute shit, right? And he managed to make it work because he was fucking Alec Guinness. You can't give it to, like, however old this kid was, like 12 or whatever, and be like, make it work, because it's, you know, poor Ahmed Best, who, you know, again, clearly very talented, tons of energy, tons of enthusiasm, really committed to the role. Given that script, what do you think? Like, imagine that you're a comedic actor and they're like, you're going to be in the new Star Wars movie. You get the script, you're like, oh, who am I playing? And you're like, oh, me, sir, Bombad, Jedi, you, sir. What is this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, come on now. Let's be serious here. Poor Ahmed Best, he's not responsible for Jar Jar. He's another one that you can come through me before you start giving shit to. That poor guy.
Yeah, for sure.
But so I don't know if we. I think I ended up talking about almost all the major actors in the movie. I'm sorry, well, we didn't really get to, like. Did you have an answer for, like, who the worst in the movie was? Because I feel like I might have accidentally surprised you with my choice of Samuel.
No,
because
I don't think it's similar to you. I didn't notice Samuel L. Jackson, so that's not something I take your point and go, oh yeah, I'm sure if I watched it back with that framing in mind, like if I watch back that scene, I don't disbelieve that there's a chance I'll be like, yeah, Dan's right. But I just, my thing on worst was, I just, like you, I just don't think it's anyone's fault but the script. I don't think it's necessarily fair to point at the obvious candidates given the material that they had to work with. So yeah, I don't think anyone. I don't think there's a single person in this room, in this movie, and, you know, I didn't know about the Terrence Stamp stuff, and to be honest with you, had to even look up who he was playing. So I don't think there's anyone, you know, of the main cast not trying. Like, do you know what I mean? No one's sleepwalking through this. No one's fed up of it. Everyone is trying here with what they've got. So, you know, I'd almost think it's almost not a fair question, because I don't think anyone is bad. I think the script is really bad. Yeah, because I mean, even like when you think about, like, even that Samuel L. Jackson scene, why is it written into the script that this wise Jedi master is so irritated by, like, why was that either the direction or the scene description given to Samuel L. Jackson? Where he's like, fine, bring the kid to us, and he's like basically rolling his eyes at Qui-Gon. Why was it written like that? Or why was on the set was Samuel told to do that? And I know there's that old joke of, like, the only thing George Lucas ever tells his actors is faster and more intense, which he's admitted to being guilty of himself. That's the only real direction he ever tends to give his actors. So, like, you know, but whatever it came from, there's no way that should have, whether Samuel L. Jackson brought that to the script where he's like shaking his head and he's all mad, and I'm like, you're a Jedi, dude. Monk. Think monk. Calm down. You know, like, even if, like, you know, just someone should have either said it to him or it shouldn't have been in the script in the first place. It's just no one was in control here, and that's. And the material given was not good to start with. Yeah, bad. Really bad, but not anyone's fault, as we've established. I've got to ask you, Chris, about, I think, well, we covered this, but we didn't I don't think we covered it from your perspective. I
spoke earlier about the ending of this movie having too much going on. And, I think the third act does personally have too many things happening. But I don't know if we ever really got your thoughts on that. And I want to make sure we covered your side of that before we moved on to whether the movie is racist or the music. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I think the music will be a funner chat.
The third act, whether... The third act specifically, whether there's too much going on.
Yeah, because obviously there's the famous clip. Should we cover the famous clip now very quickly? Because people are going to bring it up if we don't.
Sure, I don't think I know what you're about to say, so go for it.
Oh, there's the famous clip of George Lucas who's and I still to this day don't understand why they released this footage. But there's a documentary on the DVD for this movie of the making of the movie that shows the first time they went to watch the first cut in a little screening room at Lucasfilm, and everyone goes in all excited, and the movie ends, and George Lucas looks like someone just shot him in the chest, and he goes, "I may have gone too far in a few places," and then we get this amazing footage of what looks like a panicked meeting about a movie that's a mess, where the producer, Rick McCallum, and George Lucas and the third party, who I can't remember, are going, well, we can't unpick it because each piece leads to the other. And George Lucas literally goes, no, we can't unpick it, but we can lessen the effect. And they're just it's clearly like a panic stations meeting for a movie they've all just watched and gone, oh, fuck, this is not working. And... And they're clearly...
I'm loading that clip up.
Oh mate, it's so good. It's so good. It's George Lucas genuinely sounds heartbroken when he says, "I may have gone too far in a few places." He really does, and I feel for the man. I do. I really do. But obviously, that's in reference to the finale mostly, right? They're talking about unpicking what is. And I think Rick McCallum says, yeah, you're going from like a comedy beat to a character's death to the victory, and it's like 90 seconds. George just looks again like someone ran over his cat. It's just dreadful. It's a really funny clip. Everyone should watch that clip. It's on YouTube in a few different places. And you can even just watch the documentary, the full documentary. It's called The Beginning, Making of Star Wars Episode 1 Phantom Menace. So it's the official Star Wars... The official Star Wars channel uploaded that whole documentary, and there's a chapter towards the end they've earmarked called Rough Cut Review, and it has them first watching the movie, and it's there. It's about 3 minutes long. It's great. It's really good. Everyone should go check at least that out. The video is actually an hour long, and it's worth watching in full anyway, because it's a really interesting video about how they made the movie. But yeah, that is very famous. Big moment. A lot of people use it as evidence that even Lucas knew this movie was a mess.
That's brilliant.
It's so yeah. So how do you agree? Was Lucas right to have a panicked chat with his producers after that?
But the problem is that is what you've indicated they say in the documentary. I think it all unravels. I don't know what you would take out. You've created a world where the thing that I suppose you look at, like I personally, because of the Jar Jar stuff we've already talked about, don't love the droid battle stuff, but you can't take that out. So maybe the thing you focus less on, maybe we don't need... we don't need Natalie Portman and the gang to have Batman-style gadgets that mean they sort of zip up walls and stuff.
See, the problem with that, though, is would you not argue that her capturing the Viceroy is the most essential component to the plan?
Yeah.
That's the
I
problem.
would, yeah, but you could also make that same argument about Anakin taking down the MacGuffin in space, and the Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan battling Darth Maul is one of the best parts of the movie. Absolutely. So yes, is it overstuffed? Yes. Does it need to be? Yes. What would I take out? Probably nothing, because I think it would unravel even more. It does need to be there.
I think what I would do differently, if and this is from a scripting stage now, obviously, once the script is ready and you've made the movie, once you're sat in a screening room watching the movie, you're fucked, because this is all too tied in together. But I think what I might have been tempted to do, rather than having a whole sequence where Padme and her guys break in and catch the Viceroy that runs alongside everything else, that's the opening. So everyone's together, they go in, they capture the Viceroy as a group, with the Jedi, and then it splits off into our three then things. The Jedi gets pulled off to fight, Darth Maul. Anakin ends up out in the space battle to help the Gungans. The Gungans have their fight. And then you've only got three things to be worrying about because you've already done, not alongside it, but ahead of it, them capturing the Viceroy. That might have smoothed it out a bit, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and then maybe you kind of cut... after Qui-Gon's death, you just see the conclusion of that. I don't know, but but like I say, I didn't. Yes, there's too much, but it didn't harper. Like I said, I thought the film picked back up during the third act after the political stuff. So, yes, it's there, so it's absolutely a criticism, but taking kind of that out of it, I didn't not enjoy it on the rewatch because of that. Because unfortunately, they did create a scenario where all of those parts are necessary.
Yeah. So I guess the answer is to not create that scenario to start with in your scripting stage.
Yeah.
Once again, we come back to George
right.
being like, maybe don't let George write the script. I say let. George didn't want to write the script. George didn't want to make this movie, from what I can tell. But we'll come back to that in the trivia because we'll come back to that. But anyway, but I do think you're right about one thing there, and not about one thing, but right about many things. But the one thing I do want to pick up on from what you're saying then is all of those individual pieces have elements of creativity and interest and excitement within them. They just don't all come together very well. I'm very invested in the Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Darth Maul battle royale, triple threat, but be a battle royale if there were more people in it. That fight, is great. It's incredible. And while I can't think of why you would have a device that has those weird laser gates, I can't think of what practical purpose that would solve. I don't care, because it's super fun and super exciting and super tense to have all the characters separated by those, waiting, because any second they're all going to open again and they're all going to have to be forced to fight each other, and you just know Obi-Wan's going to get left behind because he's the furthest back, and you get that great moment where Qui-Gon crosses his legs and Darth Maul is just sort of pacing like a shark. That's a great, creative, brilliant thing to write into a script and then put on camera. I love it. It's the best. Give me that. And I don't even mind the Anakin's goofily in the cockpit, and he's trying to find the trigger so he can shoot the robots to help Natalie Portman, but he accidentally hits the button that basically says this is going to make this thing fly into space, and then he finds what is really obviously the trigger and is the first button I would have pressed because it looks like a fucking trigger. But he finds that after he presses the obvious launch button. Doesn't matter. I don't care. It's fun. It's kind of dumb, but I don't mind it at all.
One of the few genuine laughs I had in the movie, and it wasn't, well, you were right, the investigation, the interrogations were quick, or the meeting was quick, or whatever. It wasn't that. I did genuinely laugh at, and I don't think Jake Lloyd's delivery of it's all right as well. I did laugh at, well, and I'm paraphrasing, this isn't the exact line, but essentially Anakin going, well, he told me to stay in the cockpit.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stay in the cockpit.
Nothing wrong with that. I know people will go, well, the kid ends up saving the day. Yeah, whatever, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. Look, I do think it's a good there's a lot of coincidence involved that he hits the right button to automatically fly him up there, then he ends up inside the ship, and then he launches a torpedo seemingly unbeknownst to himself. I do wish he'd had a little more agency once he was up there. You know what I mean? Like, he'd be like, okay, I figured this out, I can help. And then maybe he hears on the headset, we're struggling, no one's been able to fly into the inside through the port that we need to go through. And him being like, oh, great. And, it would have been nicer, basically, if at the end he'd have been a bit more deliberate in his actions and a little less Jar Jar. But it's still pretty fun, and I'm fine with it. Not quite how I might have covered it, but it works. Like, again, a lot of the individual pieces in this recipe are fine. They just do not come together well at all. Obviously, the pod race is amazing. The opening combat sequence where they're escaping the ship that they go for the meeting on with the Viceroys, it's great. Except for the bit where they suddenly do weird sprinty magic speed force flash running, because no Jedi has been seen on film doing that before or since, and I still can't figure out why they have that power and have never used it since then or before then. Very head scratching, really weird. Don't understand why the movie opened with that. But anyway, there's so much good stuff, and also can we just congratulate George Lucas on the absolutely genius choice to make the enemies of these movies not people in suits like stormtroopers, but robots that the Jedi can quite freely and not gruesomely dice up with lightsabers.
Yeah, that's very true.
Come on! The creativity on display, the thinking on display here. Even if I don't think George wrote a very good script, and I don't think he 100% directed a very good movie, and I don't think he's great with actors, no one can deny the creativity that he brought to this movie. Just that choice alone allows these next three movies to be great. Imagine if the next three movies had just been Jedi not using their lightsabers properly because the enemies, you can't like dice them up because they're like human people.
Even the beginning of this movie, I was really struck by the creative choices. We've already talked about the lightsaber thing, but even then, when we go underwater and we see this underwater city appear, and I know there's been I was like, that's a really creative. Yes. I was like, George, man, like that's a really creative thing. That if going into these movies, you've only seen the three original trilogies. When that happened, the original trilogy, sorry, not trilogies. When that happens, you're like, fucking hell, that looks fucking cool. Like there's, they hit the nail on the head with the Empire Strikes Back, where it's like fundamentally George's ideas, but it's then
Lawrence Kasdan writes a script, and someone else directs the movie. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
100%. Like that's the way to do it, and there's a version of this. If that had been the approach, where some of those ideas, the underwater city, the droids, the lightsabers, are showing the things that kids in playgrounds would have talked about in the time in between, and gone, well, couldn't a lightsaber do this? Like, if it's really hot, could it do this? Could it do that? And actually seeing that shit happen, and like like you say, the principles of that last lightsaber fight with the stalking and the doors, like that's a really, at its heart, the notion of them battling in this hallway where there's doors that means the fight stops and starts and different people can get involved at different points. That's classic Star Wars. There's some classic Star Wars ideas in this movie, but the execution of the whole is off. But, it doesn't mean that those things, as you say, aren't great. And it doesn't mean that with a bit of refining in both the direction and the writing... it couldn't have been really great.
Yeah. And I think that's what's really interesting is like the people that decry, like the ones that sort of go like, look at Disney, what Disney has done with Star Wars, and be like, go back to George. George is the mastermind. You can't have Star Wars like George Lucas is his baby, and it sucks under everyone else. And I'm like, hey, go look at the credits for Empire Strikes Back. And then we'll have this conversation because, like, as you pointed out, like George, like it's so weird to me that these people who think George is like the where it begins and ends never seem to acknowledge that actually the very best Star Wars ever got. Because these people will always tell you that Empire is the best movie as well. Very ironically, they don't seem to understand that. Yeah, the reason that worked out was, as you just said, it's George's ideas filtered through other people, and I think we're going to come back to this a lot across this trilogy. And I think particularly with the third one, but no one says no to George too. That's the other problem. Again, watching the documentary, watching him come in when they're like designing the characters, and he's like, "Oh, no one, yes, and I like this, and change this," and they're all just like, "Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir." No one disagrees. No one. I'm not saying everyone needs to like immediately be like, "Oh, fuck you, I think differently," but I mean, like, no one ever just goes. Like I know I've never seen footage of anyone challenge him in any way. Like shape or form in any of these footage. When he's going through these rooms and he's talking to all these people, I've never seen anyone even just have an idea of their own in front of George. It's just he comes in, he yes knows it, and they all just go, "Yes, sir, absolutely, what you want." And I think that's bad. I don't think that's correct. I think he should have people that willing to say, "Oh, maybe it's this." You know, just maybe, you know, politely, obviously. I'm not suggesting people should be there aggressively shouting the man down, but just surrounding yourself with people that aren't so willing to bend over would help with some of this stuff too. But that's the situation we ended up in. And I think George knew. Going into this that this movie would have been better without him fully helming it. And again, we'll talk about that when we get to Triv. All right, let's cover the. I've got a couple last areas quickly to discuss. We're going to talk about the racism. Look, I don't know is the answer to this one. I don't know. I am none of the races that are theoretically being stereotyped and depicted in this movie. I know that people have felt that Watto is an unfortunate stereotype for a Jewish person. I know that some people have felt that the Gungans have a sort of like Jamaican patois. And I know that people have obviously, one of the more famous ones have accused the Trade Federation viceroys of having sort of Asian leanings and some maybe not nice stereotypes attached to that. Truth is, I'm none of those races. I can't speak to it. I didn't feel it as a child. I certainly think there is merit to it as an adult in that I definitely understand that there are some unfortunate things here. But I do also think that when creating a world unlike ours and creating races of characters, you do run the risk of letting real life. It is a mistake to let real world different cultures and races influence those choices, because you may end up creating an unfortunate stereotype by accident. I wouldn't want to defend George on this because I don't know enough about the topic, but I have always struggled to see too much malice in it, because also we're talking about individuals rather than the whole race. Like the viceroys are the villains. Watto is one character. You know, it's not like the Harry Potter goblins thing where every goblin is money grubbing. So they're sort of going like, oh, this is the stereotype that, you know, this horrible stereotype that Jewish people are stingy with money or, you know, cling on to money and wealth. Every goblin is that in the Harry Potter world. That is unfortunate. Watto is one character who happens to be like that. That could just be his character trait, not his entire race. So I find it harder to see in Star Wars than I do in Harry Potter. But I'm also not equipped to speak on it. So the really boring answer is shrug, maybe. What do you think, Chris?
Like you, I don't know enough. I certainly never, certainly as a kid, you know, previous watches, I was never aware of it until you know, seeing things and seeing kind of commentary about it. But again, I'm not like you. I want to be very careful here. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just might mean that, unfortunately, I didn't have the experiences or the awareness of those stereotypes to recognise them. And when I say experiences, I mean more awareness. Experiences is the wrong word to use. So, and you know, I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that, but that's honest. I didn't recognise it because I'm unfortunately not as aware of what those stereotypes are, and therefore wouldn't recognise them, and that's not necessarily a good thing, because it could mean that there's something horrific there that I'm not recognising, and that's not a good situation. So yeah, it's always been more like you. I think the fact that we don't see a sea of Wattos all behaving like that, and there are consistently, you know, characters like that in the Star Wars universe, and there's characters like that. You know, doesn't Simon Pegg plays a character in the Force Awakens that's just after money, and you know, you could point to Boba Fett, not Boba Fett, Jabba the Hutt. You know, so that makes me lean towards. I don't think it's necessarily deliberate, but again, as you said, we're not the right people to judge it anyway.
Because it might also be a combination of like also the voice and the way he talks, and like there might be more elements to it that we're sort of like missing. As from not being parts of those cultures. So maybe there's a lot more to it than just simply that. But it's certainly, I just don't know enough, I think, to judge on it. But it's very unfortunate that people felt that way and have felt that way. And it's a real shame. So, yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, it's not... I think that type of... There was more awareness of that type of racism, I think, in America at the time than there was in the UK, and I think that has changed now. Not in a good way. Like more awareness, because I don't know, maybe it's more prevalent or it's spoken about more. Again, I'm not the person to judge it. I can fully appreciate that someone from the UK might be going, no, always there. You just didn't see it, and. I apologize for that. That's. I'm not saying that's right, but I think in terms of us recognizing that at a younger age, I just don't think it was that form of racism was talked about that much when we were in the 90s, in the early noughties. I think that became spoken about more in the UK, to be honest with you, within the last sort of 10 years. I don't know, is that fair, or am I oversimplifying, which I wouldn't want to be deliberately.
No, I do think like there's always going to be shifts and improvements in people's understanding of what these issues are and how to identify them and correctly analyze them and truly sort of spot them when they occur. But I think obviously the difference is we're talking about a legacy piece of media here in the sense of like this is a movie made in the 90s, so it didn't receive that. I don't even think in the States it was watched with that lens at the time. It was this is something that people have sort of talked about in the wake of its release rather than as it was released, as has happened with many of these things, where it's sort of a retrospective observing of a mistake societally we used to make and not clock these things. So yeah, I don't know. It is a complicated issue. I think to not dig us into a big hole with this one, I'm just going to say I don't think it's not there. but I also can't speak to the intent of George Lucas. So these are very complicated things where it's to me it seems thin enough that there's plausible deniability, and that's why these are these are the most complicated cases of is it a racism, because you could absolutely argue I just didn't see it like that. You found something in my work that's very unfortunate, and I think it's hard to know the intent always. It's even now, as much as I do think that there is something to the Harry Potter goblins one, as time has gone on and more bits and bobs have sort of started to line up with other things, and it's still impossible to know whether that was the intent of the author at the time, or even a subconscious leaning into a stereotype without realizing they were doing it, which would also be bad. So yeah, it's a really complicated issue. This particular kind of media storytelling stereotyping is both hard to identify and prove. So I certainly wouldn't be confident enough to say it's not there, which is unfortunate. But I certainly didn't feel it as a child.
Yeah, sure.
And again, there's enough plausible deniability that I'm like, I don't know for sure. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, you don't know intent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's cover some of the bits and bobs. The last major notes I have are the music and like the sort of references to classic Star Wars. So let's start with the music. The music's fucking amazing. It's probably one of the greatest scores John Williams ever put together. Duel of the Fates is amazing, but the music throughout the entire fucking movie is just incredible. It's so good. It's so good. I wrote 3 separate times in my notes, this music is incredible. And Duel of the Fates will go down in history as one of the greatest pieces of movie music ever written. Full stop. And they don't
it's
even...
fantastic.
They don't even lean on all the themes from the original movie. It's so good. There's, I think, one point in this entire movie where they play like a little piece of music that's from the original trilogy. Everything else, as far as I'm aware, is almost entirely original, and that's amazing. So good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's well, like you say, it's just, and it is nice because as much as people have, criticized this movie for various things, it feels incredibly consistent. The one thing everyone, as divisive as this movie has become in recent years, the one thing everyone's like, well, no, that's stunning, is Duel of the Fates, very specifically.
It's great. It's so good. Yeah. So good. In terms of the references, I think they're pretty subtle. I think they're pretty small. Jabba showing up and quite funnily falling asleep during the race because he doesn't actually care about the race. It's just, betting on it and stuff. Being in Tatooine is a bit of a more direct reference, but that's obviously Anakin's heritage has to be there, I think, because it sort of makes more sense of why Luke ends up there. Although, adult Anakin as Darth not thinking to check his home for his missing child. Maybe look there. Then again, I don't know if he knows the kid survived. I think he doesn't. I guess he thinks the kids died in childbirth. But still, secret child. Maybe go look at your home planet. Maybe that's where they put it. Anyway, C-3PO is obviously a bit of a callback to the original. I do think it's a bit of a coincidence that C-3PO is made by Anakin, but fine. We also get Jawas and Tusken Raiders. So there are a bunch of references to the originals, but I think they're pretty thin, generally speaking, right? They're not too intrusive. The movie doesn't stop because we see the lightsaber that becomes Luke's lightsaber, or Luke's land speeder shows up, and there's a moment where someone puts their hand on it. It's like, this baby's gonna do great things one day. I don't know. There's none of that.
There's one slight moment of that, which is Palpatine saying to Anakin, "We'll follow your career with great interest."
Okay. But I mean, to be fair though, that's just setting up the plot for the next movie. That's not even it is a reference to the original Star Wars movies, but that's also where the plot is going.
I was surprised, and again, it's a modern lens to view this movie, but I was surprised at the lack of nostalgia bait in this movie. Mm-hmm. When Jar Jar appeared, I was like, oh, we've not really had some of that, apart from Anakin creating C-3PO, which I think exists purely so C-3PO and R2-D2 can interact, and I think just have him be there. We start Star Wars with them together. They could just be together in this movie. That would have been fine.
Did we need to see the moment of the meeting? Yeah, because the other one that I thought was a bit deliberate was Anakin Skywalker meet Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's obviously trailer bait. I'm sure that clip was in the trailer. Where it's Luke was laying out the groundwork. So there's a couple of moments like that, but I don't know. They're few and far between. They're short when they happen. They're pretty unintrusive. I think mostly it survives that without any real trouble.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I will say just a quick note that we have, just because I don't think we've called her out specifically. I thought the actress playing Anakin's mum did a wonderful job as well. I thought. Yeah,
I gave her a whole little speech when we were talking about actors.
Oh, you did? Cool.
Yeah. I called her. She did a great job. She did a great job. I forget her name now. I had it in front of me at the time, but I don't anymore, and I sound like a dick now because it sounds like I don't remember her contributions. Penilla August. Yeah, she's great. She's very good. I really enjoy. So just a few little notes that I made that I've not quickly touched on. I really like the moment where really early in the movie, Amidala is got to make a big decision about whether she abandons the planet or not, and there's a moment when she looks to her handmaid, and it's a really subtle hint that obviously that's not the real Amidala, and she's literally confirming the choice with the real Amidala first. I think I missed that on early viewings. So yeah, pretty cool. Pod racing.
I really like that.
Pod racing remains the best sequence in the movie. It's really well shot. It's very inventive. It's basically space chariot racing, and that's just a really good idea. But criticism that's in my notes, is it a race or is it a demolition derby? Because the challenge doesn't appear to be to win, but to be the last one standing. Because I'm pretty sure there's no one else in the race when Anakin crosses the line. And I'm sorry, that is not a race.
I agree with that. Yeah. I also thought they did a really good job of the main guy. He ends up the guy he ends up facing off at the very end. They did a real good job of making that guy just a prick. I was like,
Sebulba.
do we do Knobhead of the Week in Rewind reviews?
No, we
but
don't,
then he's
but we
like
could.
exploded and stuff, and I was like, oh. No, I think he gets his just desserts. He doesn't need to be Knobhead of the Week. But although it's a little bit like, how long is that like piece of kit that he that's stuck in that machine? Like there, just hanging out before it does any damage. It's bizarre. But the pod racing sequence is great, and I thought they did a really good job of making that character quite menacing. Pod racing, I feel like pod racing is something that gets criticism though, but I don't really know why. Do you know anything of why there's people are slightly negative towards it?
I can only go off my anecdotal. I've only ever heard people say, "Oh, it's the one good bit of the movie," which I've heard people say a few times, and they're right. Well, they're not right that it's the one good bit of the movie, but it's definitely one of the movie's best sequences. Like, it's very exciting to watch. It's very fast paced. It's really well shot. The music's great. You do feel genuine tension. It's well done. Really well done. But I don't think I've ever personally heard anyone criticize it. I guess you could kind of say like it is quite a long sequence. I guess somebody might have the complaint or the criticism that it goes on for a bit longer than it needs to. But like, it's the mid act of the movie. You need a big action something there, and I don't know. I don't need another gunfight. The movie's got plenty of those. So I'm happy for the sort of action beat in the center of the movie to be a race that's like got a lot riding on it, gambling wise. Also, Qui-Gon should go see someone about his gambling addiction because it is pretty serious.
Yeah, but you know why he's doing it. I'm
only kidding.
I did my best to free your mother as well. Well, you were like, the boy and the mum, just the boy. All right. And then you fixed the dice to mean that it was just Anakin. I'm not sure you can in good conscience say you did everything you could.
Yeah. And I think between the two as well, we got Qui-Gon, who's clearly developing like a gambling addiction, and we got Obi-Wan, who's working on his comedy roast battle skills back at the ship. Why do I get the feeling we've picked up another pathetic life form? Oof! Obi-Wan! Get you some aloe vera for that burn. Dear Lord. Poor Anakin. You've not even met the kid. Pathetic life form. I guess that's more of a dig at Jar Jar, but still. Yikes. Anyway. I did write down, obviously, one of the cheesiest lines of the whole movie, but it's a fun one, which is Palpatine, when his plan to get himself power through all of this becomes clear, and he comes in and he says with a straight face, someone says, "Yo, you won't believe who's been nominated to be Chancellor in place of Valorum. It's Palpatine," and he's like, "A surprise for sure, but a welcome one." And I'm just like, "Yeah, you bastard." He delivers it so
he's
well.
Great.
It's great. I love him.
He's so good.
I love Ian McDermott. I also wrote down the sentence, a normal movie might struggle to invest the viewer in one goal. How about 4? I guess a bit of Obi-Wan's snarkiness rubbed off on me at some point, because I clearly felt a bit snarky when I wrote that line. I do believe this. All the droids being controlled by one ship is dumber than a single vent that destroys the entire Death Star. People complain that A New Hope, it's kind of silly that the Death Star has this like glaring weakness where you get one rocket down a hole and it blows the whole thing up. I think it's possible that a ship doing something that big and ridiculous, like a ship built to destroy an entire planet, might have weaknesses, structural ones, because of how extraordinary that technology is. But if you're building robots, right, in a world that has droids, scientifically self-sufficient thinking droids, several of which we meet in this movie, I don't know how you can excuse an army all being controlled by one, where if you break it, like if you blow up one thing, they all just sort of fall limp. Why don't they have cognizance of their own? Why do the Trade Federation droids all fall down, Chris, when they beat the mothership? Doesn't make any sense.
Well, because the movie needs to end.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, in terms of A New Hope, the reason it has that flaw is because Galen Erso deliberately designed it to have that flaw, Dan.
Well, Chris, I'm really impressed with how quickly you Googled that character's name.
Yeah, absolutely Googled it. You know that.
Of course you did. I do know that.
Pulling that from nowhere.
No, you definitely weren't.
Absolutely wasn't pulling that from nowhere.
So yeah, that's just another one of my notes. The moment Mole reveals his second blade is like cinema. I wrote that down. I also I wrote down in just quote marks, I'll try spinning. That's a good trick.
Oh yeah, that was cheesy. I was like, oh, come on.
Okay, so I do you remember I said earlier, there are some genuine moments where Jar Jar makes me laugh. Only a couple, but they exist. I found one. I've written one down. Jar Jar, do something. Misa, give up. Someone asking Jar Jar to do something and then him immediately giving up is pretty good. That's a funny moment. They earned that one. So yeah. Last little note that I got before we get to anything else, overall thoughts and whether we recommend or not. Anakin in his little adorable Jedi apprentice attire, I could just pinch his little cheeks and pull on his little rat tail. It's pretty cute. It's wearing a little robe. Yeah. It's wearing Jedi pajamas. It's like a kid cosplaying as a Jedi.
It's good stuff.
It's fucking adorable. I'd watch a movie of little child Jedi running around, just being adorable.
That might be what the Daisy Ray Ridley movie is.
Yeah.
Isn't that about training Jedi?
Yeah, sure. I'd watch a whole movie of that, like a kid running around in Jedi pajamas, just being cute.
Yeah, especially because the next time we see cute Jedi children, they all get slaughtered.
Not the younglings. Yeah. So let's get to the thrust of this, Chris. Are we recommending Phantom Menace?
It's pointless, Dad, because there's not a category of person. Because there's not a category of person. If you're gonna see it, you've seen it.
Yeah.
And if you're not gonna see it, you shouldn't start here. Because you know what I mean. So,
all right. Let me ask you this, right? Let's say you've seen Star Wars, right? When you were younger, you enjoyed them as far as you remember. You've not watched these prequels pretty much since you were a kid, and you're wondering about, is it worth a look back? Have another run, another watch through.
Yeah.
Yeah? You recommend it?
It is. And I also wouldn't. I think a great way to watch Star Wars, and I've watched it this way, is the machete order, where you do New Hope, Empire, then you go back. Well, technically, maybe you could go Rogue One, New Hope, Empire. Then you go back, and technically the machete order says skip Phantom Menace and go back and watch Attack, Revenge, then go forward again to Return of the Jedi, and then obviously the sequel trilogy. I don't think it's worth cutting out Phantom Menace of that order. I would include Phantom Menace in a rewatch, and yes, I think it is worth revisiting for sure.
I have also done the machete order and didn't care for it. But I understand why people like it. I think the problem with the machete order is Revenge of the Sith, because Revenge of the Sith leads so neatly into A New Hope. To finish Revenge of the Sith and then put on Return of the Jedi is so juxtaposing. I would argue that is more of a problem than, watching all three originals and then all three prequels. I mean, I think release order is the common recommendation. I actually think just chronological order, just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I think
is fine.
I think it's two different asks, though, isn't it? Whether you're doing a rewatch or whether you're watching it for the first time.
Oh, for the first time? Yeah, originals all the way. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're doing 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9.
Well, the advantage of the first time order for the machete is that it protects the reveal in Empire. And it's it's a better reveal of Luke and Leia being brother and sister than you get in Return of the Jedi, which is just a bit like they just look at each other and it's like, hey, I think we're brother and sister. Like,
oh yeah, I guess that's a really good point because, like, I guess if you were brand new, if you're watching it, if you've never seen if we're coming from this from the approach of you've never seen a Star Wars movie and you do the machete order, I guess there is the benefit of, like, you get to the end of Revenge of the Sith, and they're like Luke and Leia, and you're like, oh, and like, yeah, I guess that would be a big reveal. I suppose that would be a cool moment. Yeah, I guess that's cool. But like, yeah, I guess if we're talking first time viewer, definitely don't watch them chronologically, for sure. But you know, I would always just tell people to do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9. But that's, you know, maybe I'm just boring and think we should do it in release order. Maybe that's just a boring thing to think.
No, I think there's a merit. I think there's a merit to that for sure. But yeah, in terms of is it worth a revisit? Is the question? Then yeah, I absolutely think it is. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's so hard because I feel like that question is going to become complicated because. Is Phantom Menace worth a revisit? Yes. But is the pain that follows going to be worth it? Maybe not. Because...
Yeah, but we haven't analysed those yet.
Well, it's 100% true. It's exactly why I said maybe not. We will see. But I think that's why it's going to get complicated. Because if I'm just saying on Phantom Menace, yeah, I think it is worth a rewatch. I think it works better than its reputation. I still think it is a deeply flawed movie. It is not a great film by any stretch of the imagination, but it is entertaining. The problem is, I feel like if you watch Phantom Menace, you really are then committing to watching all three, and I don't believe that's going to be true of... Well, it's definitely not, I don't think it's going to be true of 2, and I don't think it's going to be true of 3. So, yeah, tricky. I am standing by our theory boldly that this might end up coming out of this the best of the 3, but we'll see. But it is a pretty broken movie. So I guess in general, if you've never seen a Star Wars movie, absolutely not. If you're a Star Wars fan that's wondering if this is worth coming back to, yeah, if you've got the time, yeah, I guess so. But be warned where this is going. Well, you know,
what's Shall we triv it up?
Yes, I'm going to give you some trivia. So, George Lucas made a similar deal for this one as he did with A New Hope between himself and 20th Century Fox, where they agreed that he would forgo any salary whatsoever in order to preserve rights to the final cut of the movie, as well as ancillary rights for toys and commercial tie-ins, which obviously continue to make him all of the money until presumably...
Whoa. So he didn't get paid anything for this movie.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like a salary to write and direct it.
Mm-hmm.
That's mad.
Yeah, I think he did the same thing for A New Hope.
Yeah, I know, I get that, and I get that then, but I don't know. I just think there's a world where he could have negotiated, $1 million. I know that sounds ridiculous, but in the worlds that we're talking, or $250,000 or something, like the fact that he literally got nothing and that deal, that's crazy.
Yeah, agreed. But he was smart because let me tell you, he will have gotten way more money out of those toy rights than any salary he was ever going to get from these movies.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And he knew that, and he was correct. We said we'd talk about this later. George Lucas didn't want to write or direct this movie at all. He approached an absolute bucket load of people that we know of to try and do it in his place, and no one wanted to. Everyone thought he should do it, which is unfortunate. He approached David Hare to write the screenplay and even co-direct the film. He confessed he had reservations about working with actors, so he knew that maybe he wasn't an actor's director, and he hoped that he could just focus on the action and have David Hare focus on the actors, but Hare declined. So Lucas then asked Lawrence Kasdan to write the script. Kasdan turned it down because he thought, Lucas's relationships to the movie had taken too much of a step back, and he should take some responsibility and make exactly the movie he wanted to make. In November of 2015, Ron Howard confirmed that both he, Robert Zemeckis, and Spielberg were all approached by Lucas to direct the film. It really feels like Lucas just went around Hollywood like, someone do this. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it.
In that case, because I didn't know all that, I rephrase it like even more so.
Mm-hmm.
I think people need to give him less shit, because if he tried to get someone else to direct and write it, then, you know, fair play. He did recognise it's still a problem. Maybe there's a world where he could have been firmer. Like, I'm pretty sure if he turned around to well, it wouldn't have been Disney, it would have been Fox, and said, look, guys, it's not happening unless you can find someone. Then they'd have found someone, but that shows a certain amount of intent there to like you say, no.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. And this is one of a long line of weird things. This next piece of trivia, is one of a long line of weird things that happened where Michael Jackson tried to be in a famous movie. According to Ahmed Best, Michael Jackson campaigned for the role of Jar Jar Binks. I cannot tell you how many. There's a great video on YouTube somewhere that like breaks down. I can't remember whose video it is now, but there's a video that breaks down all of the times Michael Jackson attempted to be in a big franchise movie just because he wanted to, because he was just like, yeah, why not? It's insane. He tried to be Spider-Man at one point. Like, Michael Jackson has this weird, insane, like, obsession with just like being different characters. It's going to come up again. It'll come up. It will continue to come up as we do Rewind reviews. But yeah, he campaigned for the part of Jar Jar Binks. Lucas decided against it because he thought it might compromise the movie. Yes.
Yeah, probably would have done.
Although Ahmed Best tells the story of being taken backstage at a Michael Jackson concert and meeting Michael, and Michael being a bit frosty with him. So Michael did not take it well. Michael did not take it well. Okay, I should clarify. I only vaguely remember him telling that story, and if I've misremembered a detail, please feel free to correct me. That one I didn't do any research on. Tupac Shakur also expressed interest in reading for a role, and even lobbying mutual friends of his to get them in touch with George Lucas and set up a meeting so he could read for a role. Sadly, his tragic murder in September 96 prevented any such meeting from taking place. It is speculated that the part in question was Mace Windu, but obviously the character's name was not publicly known before filming, so it's not clear which character he would have played. But yeah, apparently he was a Star Wars fan since childhood, and when he heard Lucas was looking to do a movie, he reached out immediately. That is fascinating and tragic. I don't know what else to say about that other than those two words.
Well, there's all those, you know, Tupac's alive, theories out there. So, you know, maybe if we find out at some point, like, oh yeah, not only is he alive, but Tupac played the droids. Be like, what?
Yeah, Tupac was inside R2-D2 the whole time. You thought it was Kenny Baker come back, as that's what they credited, but really Kenny Baker didn't really feel like getting in the tin suit again. He thought it was too hot, so they let Tupac do it. They smuggled him in the dead of night.
There's someone like, if you take the first letter of every second album track on the posthumous, I can never say that word, posthumous Tupac releases, it actually spells out the sentence, I am R2-D2.
Yeah.
Someone's looking at those numbers.
But, you know, I get it. Like, this movie probably wasn't very hard to cast. Like, people are really excited for Star Wars, right? It was probably harder to cast people in the subsequent ones, but in this one, not hard at all. Like, Liam Neeson, for example, signed on without having read a script because he just really wanted to be in a Star Wars movie. And there is, of course, that really famous moment of... From the behind the scenes footage where Ewan McGregor gets like kicked off the platform when he's fighting Darth Maul, lands in the airbag that they've got ready for him, and he gets out and they're like, they asked me if I wanted to do Star Wars, fuck yeah, and then he walks off. It's great. It's a really lovely moment. He's just so excited to be there, and obviously famously he was so excited to be doing Star Wars, he kept making the lightsaber noises himself on set, and George Lucas had to tell him several times to stop because they're going to add those noises in post. Ewan has said, I kept getting carried away. So that's all very good. People were very excited to do it. But funnily enough, casting Liam Neeson ended up costing the movie an extra $150,000 in construction because the way the sets worked was they were only ever needed to be as tall as the actors, and then everything above them, above their headline, would just be CGI'd. So they'd build the bottom 6 foot of a building, have them walk in front of it, and then the top percentage of the building was just going to be done in computers afterwards. But because Liam Neeson is so tall, they estimate it cost them an extra $150,000 in construction just because he was a few foot taller than everyone else in the scenes. I love that fact. One of my favourites.
And you say he's not a main character.
Yeah, they spent a lot of money to bring him in, didn't they? That's true. Ewan McGregor was cast from a shortlist. I say a shortlist of 50 actors, and they were all compared to young pictures and young, footage of young Alec Guinness. Some of the we don't know a lot of the names that were on that list, but one of them we do know was on that list was Kenneth Branagh.
Oh wow.
That would have been an interesting alternate casting. Ewan McGregor recalled that his performance in this film consisted mostly of walking into rooms and looking up. I put that one in because that was just such a funny sentence.
Again, another one where George is probably... Again, it just makes you feel... George, you didn't even want the fucking job. Yeah. And now he's like, oh, fucking hell, I've just had this conversation with Samuel L. Jackson. I've got to... Ewan, you're Obi-Wan. There'll be shit in the future. Don't worry. It'll be cool. Like, you're fine. You'll do more next time.
Yeah. Agreed. Ewan McGregor actually said of working with Jake Lloyd, I've never worked with a child actor as good as Jake. He seems to have always wanted to be an actor. He was always a professional, and he loved to pull practical jokes from time to time. Here's my thing. That's delightful and tragic. Also, because Jake Lloyd quit acting shortly after this because of how much bullying he received after being in this movie. And that is tragic. Genuinely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Poor Jake Lloyd. He deserved better. So did Ahmed Best, but yeah, both of them deserved a lot better. Very weird for people to continually attack actors in a movie like this. So strange. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, anyway.
Especially child actors. Like,
right.
Fuck off. Like, I just think, I say this a lot, but I just think, and I'm aware that, what we do here, we will criticize people. We're critiquing movies. We've criticized George Lucas throughout this. Mm-hmm. But I think in terms of like the bullying of someone like Jake Lloyd, like what's the point? What is the point of you putting that out there in the fucking world? What is the point of you writing that on a forum or in the modern day equivalent? Tweeting negativity like that. Like, just it's so pointless. Bless him.
Yeah, I agree. It's a real shame. Yeah, and he did it mostly in a pre-internet age. That he received a lot of shit, and even he felt it. That says how strong the backlash was. It's a real shame. Natalie Portman admitted in an interview with James Lipton that she had not seen a Star Wars movie before being cast as Padme. She actually admitted she didn't know the difference between Star Wars and Star Trek, which is quite funny. So yeah, there you go. That's fine. Not every actor needs to be 100% invested in the thing they're doing. As long as they're good in the role, I don't care about that. I don't need my actors to be, that familiar with the project. Like, yeah, doesn't bother me at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it was clear Matt Smith wasn't particularly familiar with Doctor Who before becoming the Doctor, and I'd say the same is probably true of Ncuti Gatwa. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Not a problem. It's fun when they're also super in on it too. That's also good. But like, I have no preference for that. I don't care. I don't need my actors to be, just show up on the set and give a good performance, please. That's your job. Their job is not care about this franchise beyond promoting the thing they're doing. Anyway, Keira Knightley's parents tried to convince her not to audition, but the 12-year-old actress still saw a role given she was a big Star Wars fan. But this ended up being I don't think she would described it quite as a regret, but she has described having a pretty, she struggled during the production of this movie. Basically, the wardrobe requirements were extremely uncomfortable, and she was sitting around very still in these very uncomfortable wardrobes for quite long sessions of recording. So yeah, I don't think the experience lived up to the excitement and the hopes, but there you go.
That's a shame to hear.
Yeah, it is a shame to hear, especially for someone who would have been as young as she was at the time. But movie industry kind of sucks. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe she should not have auditioned. Although, where else would they have found someone who looks that much like Natalie Portman?
Yeah, and also that's a hard thing to. I wonder what their logic was, because I'd be surprised if it was. I imagine the costume's going to be an issue. Like, I wonder why they didn't want. Maybe they thought she was too young for that sort of exposure. I don't know.
Yeah. That's a good point. Actually, they couldn't have possibly known why. But yeah, she's spoken about it since. Look, she's a happy, healthy adult now. I don't, it's not the end of the world. But like, yeah, that sucks that she wasn't happy on the set. That makes me sad. But there you go. Oh yeah, Ian McDiarmid was actually surprised when George Lucas approached him 16 years after Return of the Jedi to reprise the role of Palpatine, and he had assumed that a younger actor would play the part of a young Palpatine in the prequels. In fact, he was initially told by Lucas that he would play a senator. He didn't find out he was playing Palpatine again until he arrived on set. I love Ian McDiarmid. He's the best.
And I can see, you can see. I mean, it works fine, but you can see his logic. Why he is 16 years older, playing a younger version of the character, but obviously with the makeup and stuff used in A New Hope, you get away with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, but I don't think he was originally in A New Hope, was he? I don't think they cast him until Empire, and then they re-edited him into New Hope.
Sorry, Empire.
I think
sorry.
So. But yeah, no, agreed. I still agreed, 100%. And obviously, most use of him was returned. But yeah, Qui-Gon Jinn's communicator that he uses throughout this time on Naboo is just a redecorated Gillette Sensor Excel razor for women. I love that. That really feels Star Wars to me. That detail, because Luke's lightsaber hilt was just like the flash of a camera. Like an old camera that they just sort of refitted. So that's very good. Everyone wants... Look, we all saw the ETs. I don't want any comments that we didn't talk about this. In the Senate scene, and where Amidala is asking for a vote of no confidence, and you see all the different species in the little... They're all, in the little pods. One of the pods has ET... extraterrestrial species, whatever that species is called, in it. It's a nice little reference to a movie made by George Lucas's good friend Steven Spielberg. We all saw it. Shut up.
I didn't see that. I'm going to look that up now.
Yeah, it's great. It's cool that they're there. But like, it's one of those things where every time you see like those, 10 facts you didn't know, it's always like, it's like the Twin Pines Lone Pine Mall thing from Back to the Future, where every time someone thinks they have a fun fact you've never heard of, it's always that same fact. I'm like, I got it. He knocked over the tree and now it's Lone Pine. Shut up. I saw the ETs. Go away. We all saw the ETs. Right. So Natalie Portman missed the premiere for this because she had to go to study for her final exams. The folly of youth. How dare she try to educate herself? Outrageous.
Man.
Ewan McGregor apparently studied many of Alec Guinness's films, including the original Star Wars, to ensure accuracy from everything to from his accent to his pacing, and he bloody nailed it. Good work. Jake Lloyd has described a 6-hour cut of this movie being screened, and those who saw it proclaimed it to be mind-bogglingly good. He was young at the time. I don't know if he heard that correctly. I find it hard to believe. I don't find it hard to believe there was a 6-hour cut, but I do find it hard to believe it was mind-bogglingly good.
Yeah, and you do wonder, maybe that's the cut that was being watched when Lucas was like, I may have gone too far.
Yeah, maybe. Darth Maul doesn't show up until about half an hour into the movie. He says a total of 3 lines and has about 8 minutes of screen time across the movie, mostly standing, walking, or fighting. Maul, of course, is a very memorable character, but he had a lot more dialogue in the original cut of the movie, including a monologue about fear that was used in several of the TV spots for the film, but never appeared in the movie. Peter Serafinowicz, who contributed the voice, very much like... So Ray Park played the on-set menacing Darth Maul, and a bit like the original situation with Darth Vader, where they had James Earl Jones come in to add the voice. They had Peter Serafinowicz provide the voice. He was a little disappointed to not show up much in the movie when they cut most of Darth Maul's dialogue. And apparently he's not been very kind about George Lucas's directing. since, where he said that George Lucas's direction amounted to make him sound evil. He also
but by that point, that's the in the studio voice acting. Like, do you know what I mean? George didn't want to be there to begin with. You think he wanted to be sat there directing Peter in the sound booth?
Agreed. And on top of that, he was annoyed he wasn't invited to the premiere. And also he doesn't think the film is very good, but lots of people think that, so it is what it is. You know the real tragedy of all... Go on, sir.
When the character returns in various media, is this the only time he's voiced him?
That is a great question. I believe so. I think Darth Maul is voiced by someone else in the Clone Wars series.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Darth Maul is a great character in the Clone Wars series. But yeah, that's a great question. Very good question. I will say as well, right, the real tragedy of a lot of this is there's a really, I think a famous interview George Lucas gave to like 60 Minutes where he says, if you're going to make a movie, you know, you live with the movie for 4 years. You have to really love it. You have to really believe in it, because otherwise you'll go mad. And I think those words echo really interestingly now in the wake of this. During the first week of the trailer's release, many theatres reported up to 75% of their audiences paying full prices for a movie and then walking out once the trailer for episode 1 had screened.
Wow.
Madness.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Ewan McGregor has described that before filming, he and Liam Neeson were taken to a private room where Lucasfilm employees approached them with a long, locked wooden box where, when opened, they saw 20-ish lightsaber hilts that they were being allowed to choose from for their character's official weapon. Ewan went on to explain that George Lucas wanted them to only do it. They only had 10 minutes to do it, basically, because he wanted them to pick based on feel and not thoroughly studying them. And I want to bring this up because this is one of those great moments when we really can get a hint of why it's not always good to rely on an actor's recollection of a thing happening. Because the footage of this moment exists. And they were not whisked off to a private room. Nor were they together. The lightsabers were brought out, the hilts, in a big long box. But there were like 10 people there. None of which were Liam Neeson. And Ewan McGregor picked up a few until he thought he found the one that he liked the look of, but also it felt good to hold and wield. And that's how he picked. It's literally on film, and it's just really interesting to hear his version of events and then see it on camera. Because I did the trivia and then watched the documentary that has that footage in it. And it is remarkable to sort of go, oh, we can't ever listen to these actors when they tell stories from these sets. It's just interesting.
But it also, I don't know. I guess, I don't know if that's, I don't know. Should that be the actor's decision in the first place? Do you know what I mean? Surely choose.
I guess. I mean, would you have been too perturbed to discover that, like, you know, on the set, on the production of like Harry Potter, they let the kids look at a box full of like wands, and they could choose, because all the wands ultimately, like, it's, you know, it's a prop for the movie, like, you know, the one that they felt they connected to the most. That's fine, right? It's not. Is that a big deal?
Maybe. I just think, I don't know. I just think there could be. Yeah. No, I don't think that. You know, if it's, oh well, you know, they've got to be comfortable with it. They've got to, you know, they've got to connect with it. I think, you know, act. I don't know, maybe I'm being too harsh. As someone who's literally been in amateur dramatics performances and been shitty about what I wear as a costume, I suppose I am being really unfair because I've literally worn my own clothes as a costume before. So yeah, fair enough. Maybe I'm
assuming. Look, they chose from a box. Of like, there's like, I don't know. I looked in that. I glanced when I saw it in the footage, and there were like 10 lightsaber hilts in there, maybe, in the box, all in like styrofoam. I assume and I could be wrong, but I assume Lucas looked at all of those first and went, yeah, I'd be happy. Like, these are the ones that I'd be happy to be. Like, he probably narrowed it down first, right? Like, took out any he didn't think, like, worked for the character for whatever reason. Yeah, I was okay with it.
That's fair.
Understood. Anakin's theme has a little musical variation of the Imperial March baked into it. I think that's really cool. John Williams was on top form during this movie. According to the script, the chance cube that Watto rolled was fixed to land on red. That's why he's so mad when it lands on blue. But he can't express why he's so mad because he can't go, I cheated, so you must have cheated.
Ah, that's cool.
Yeah. It'd be cool it'd be cooler if it was in the movie, but not just in the script. But yeah, agreed. During production, a fierce sandstorm destroyed several of the sets. Filming resumed a few days later once they rebuilt everything, but Lucas weirdly considered this a good omen because the same thing had happened when they were filming A New Hope. But I can tell you now, having seen the documentary, Rick McCallum, the producer, was not okay with this happening.
Yeah, this is the thing. This again is why, it's why it should have been someone else, as he knew. So there's the production is shut down, sets are destroyed, and you got a producer tearing their hair out, going, "Fuck, how are we gonna find the money to address this issue?" And
the footage is amazing.
You zoom out of the frame, and you got George Lucas going, "Well, I mean, this actually happened on A New Hope, so I think this is a good omen." Like, what, in the documentary, do you see the producer be like, fucking hell?
Yeah, they've got the footage of them arriving after the storm, because obviously they had to abandon the set because of the storm for safety. And it's like 2 days later, the storm has settled, and they go back to look at how bad it is, and they don't know. And he's on the phone like, yeah, it's all fucked. Like, Anakin's pod has been absolutely ruined. Like, he's just listing all the stuff that's like broken. And he's genuinely devastated. You can definitely tell.
Given the footage that did make it into this documentary,
yes,
is it possible that this is what Jake Lloyd was talking about? There's a 6-hour edit of this documentary
the documentary. There are two, I think. There's an hour-long one, which I think was on the DVD. There's an hour-and-a-half one, which I haven't looked at, and I don't know if it's vastly different or it's mostly the same. But yeah, it's on the official Star Wars YouTube channel. Everyone should go watch it. It's good. It's really good. It's fun. But yeah, it did teach me a lot about what happened on the set of this movie. I'll tell you that. So tests were conducted to see if Yoda could be realized digitally, but the technology was not up to scratch yet, so they used a puppet and then used CGI Yoda for the subsequent movies. But modern day releases of this movies have the puppet replaced by a CGI character. Lucas always going back and fiddling with his movies. The version on Disney Plus has the CGI character. It looks fine. I think, to be honest with you, I think they made a really bad choice here, because basically that puppet that they used, they tried to make it look like Yoda but younger, and it looks wrong. It's like face shape is wrong. It's a bad puppet. So I think they compare a bad puppet to like a good CGI recreation of the puppet from the last movie, from the other movies. And yeah, the CGI creation is going to seem better. But in Last Jedi, when they bring a puppet back and it looks like the puppet from the original one, that's best Yoda, visually speaking. The CGI Yoda of these movies is all weird and rubbery and bouncy, and I don't like it. They're right to have noticed the puppet that was originally in the Phantom Menace that has since been replaced didn't look great, but the wrong solution. They identified the wrong problem, basically. It's not that it was a puppet, it's that it wasn't a great puppet. That's,
yeah, for sure.
A few USC students took a Japanese laserdisc and made their own edit of the movie. Contrary to popular belief, it doesn't completely remove Jar Jar, but it does remove many of his sillier and more distracting moments and make several other minor tweaks. It became known as the Phantom Edit, and it caught the attention of George Lucas, who requested to see a copy. Once George Lucas saw the copy, Lucasfilm then issued a press release reiterating that it is illegal to copy and redistribute the movie or any edit of the movie. Unclear whether George Lucas was just annoyed that it was better than his cut, or if he just was like, it's a copyright problem, let's chase him. I don't know. We don't know what he actually thought of it, but we do know he requested a copy and saw it, so that's interesting. Yeah.
And yet, still the best edit thing for me, I think, of the prequels is the notion that wasn't Tobey Maguire? No, Topher Grace.
Topher Grace did. Yep.
Topher Grace did an edit of the 3 movies together, and apparently it was amazing.
Yeah, so the story, I didn't have that in here, but yeah, the story is that Topher Grace edited together essentially one movie out of the 3 Star Wars prequels, screened it briefly for just a close collection of friends and people. Everyone who's come out of that screening said it was absolutely amazing. He was just learning editing, and he was curious about it and storytelling and stuff, and it was like an experiment for him. He then reportedly deleted that edit completely, and it has just gone into the legends and lores of lost media. I think if that was to be released today, there's no way it lives up to the hype of that, and everyone's saying that it's amazing. There's just no way. But yeah, lots of different people who were at that screening, and I'm sure people who weren't. Like Mick Foley always talks about. Mick Foley is a famous wrestler who had a very famous match in the 90s called Hell in a Cell, and he says that the amount of people that have come up to him in the years since and gone, "Oh, I was there that night, man." He's like, "I'm pretty sure the attendance that night was only so many thousand, and I'm sure more people have told me they were there than could have been there." The amount of people that have said they saw this cut.
There was a gig in Manchester. I think it was maybe like the Sex Pistols or something, but there was a gig in Manchester where basically the notion is every famous band that came from Manchester for like the 10 years after that, it was like, oh yeah, I was at that gig. Maybe it was the Stone Roses, but yeah, it's a similar thing where it's how many like young prodigies of the Manchester music scene were there for that?
Yeah, really interesting. Anyway, the blue-haired slave girl stood behind Jabba during the pod race. He's wearing the same slave costume that Leia ends up wearing in Return of the Jedi. That is one of them subtle nods to the original trilogy I referred to earlier, where it's not particularly overt, but if you look, it's there. That's the good kind of nod. I'm fine with that. Although, I'll be honest with you, I didn't notice it. It took IMDb to point it out to me. The only actors reprising their roles from the original trilogy are obviously Anthony Daniels reprising the voice of C-3PO, not the motion capture for the first time. We'll talk about that in a minute. Kenny Baker, Frank Oz, and Ian McDiarmid. Everyone else, of course, didn't end up coming back or weren't needed at all because their characters are no longer in the story. The original plan was for Darth Maul to simply fall down the chute in one piece, but speaking to Empire shortly after the movie's release, Lucas said of the original death scene, "I looked at it and thought this isn't going to work because if people like him enough, they're going to want him to come back and they're going to assume somehow he gets out of it. So I had to cut him in half to make sure everyone knew this guy's gone, he's history, he ain't coming back, and I'll come up with another apprentice." The original death scene was reportedly screened to test audiences before the movie's release and ultimately was retained in case the MPAA had problems with the guy getting cut in half. Now, we'll talk about this more in the sequels to this movie, but killing Maul, while powerful in the moment, it was a mistake. Massive mistake. And
yeah,
I think
for sure.
and I think the issues from that choice run through the next 2 movies, and we will talk about it at the time rather than now because there's still a little bit of trivia left, and we are this is overrunning to some degree. Natalie Portman worked with a voice coach on what dialect Queen Amidala would have. They settled on a classically imperious kind of tone, the type that Katharine Hepburn or Lauren Bacall would have used in their heyday. Portman's voice was then electronically lowered in post-production to make her sound more queenly. I've always found that distracting. It's weird. They should not have done that. I've always said that. I don't get it. They only do it when she's in queen garb and queen mode, but I don't like it. I've never liked it because it's just weird. Her voice just suddenly gets like 2 octaves deeper or whatever. Earlier drafts of the script placed more emphasis on Obi-Wan Kenobi. Originally, he was a fully trained Jedi at the start of the movie, and he was the only negotiator sent to Naboo. Qui-Gon was not introduced until late in the movie, or later in the movie when they visit Coruscant, and he would have been around the age of Obi-Wan and like a colleague rather than a mentor. I would have preferred. I'm happy that they changed Qui-Gon to being a mentor, but I do wish Obi-Wan had been the focus character of this movie. I think the movie would have been better. Truthfully.
I don't know what is happening to your mic, but I didn't get any of that, so I'm just going to make a noise, which is neither necessarily committing to agreeing or not agreeing. So you ready for this? There you go.
What, can you clarify what you mean by what is happening to my mic? What are you hearing? I'm curious. Listeners can find out.
Literally, and it can't be like this because I know that I'm well aware that your microphone is like, I believe, on your headphones, so it can't be this. But it's as if you've put a hand over a microphone, like, you know, Big Brother, when people, or I'm a Celeb, where they put their hand over their mic to sort of talk and to hide it from the producers, but that you can still sort of make out that something's being said and they subtitle it. It sounds like that, or it did for that piece of trim for some reason.
How about now?
Yeah, I think hopefully it's better now. Yeah.
Do I sound better now?
Weird. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Maybe the headphones are dying or something. I don't know. But yeah.
Oh, they could be. It's been a very long podcast. Yeah, sorry. C-3PO was supposed to. Well, if you can't hear me after this next one, say, and I'll switch to a pair of headphones. I've got another pair of headphones just at the end of this table, so bear with me. C-3PO was originally supposed to appear in scenes. Oh, yeah. Okay, headphones just died. That's what's happened. One sec.
Okay.
For listeners, you wouldn't have heard this, but my headphone just went in my ear, boop, 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 and then just died. So, one sec.
So maybe I'm not here. Maybe then I'm not even hearing you through the headphones. I'm hearing you through your phone, which is far away from you, and that's why it sounds like, yeah. Maybe it's that.
Wait. How about this? How about this? Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better.
Much better. He said much better, listeners. We figured it out. I'm sorry, Chris. I don't know how much trivia you missed, but we'll go from there.
And that's all good.
So C-3PO was only supposed to appear in scenes in and around the slave quarters, but during post-production, Lucas decided to have him added to various scenes outside, at the race and stuff. Fine. Yeah, cool. Of the 2 hours and 13-minute running time, only 10 to 15 minutes contain no visual effects at all. I'll be honest, that's actually more than I would have predicted, to be honest with you. But there you go. This is one of my favourite pieces of trivia. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, here it is. This is one of my favourite... I got lost in my notes for a second, sorry. One of my favourite pieces of trivia we've ever had, Chris. So this movie was shot on 35mm film. But because they were testing the possibility of switching to digital for the next two movies, which they did ultimately do, Lucas has confirmed that 2 shots in this entire movie were done digitally, and he dared anyone to try and figure out which shots those were. The 2 scenes recorded digitally were Qui-Gon taking Anakin's blood sample and promoting Obi-Wan to the level of Jedi Knight.
I mean, they seem... I don't know if I'd have been able to pull them out of nowhere, but they seem obvious. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that's a hard code to crack, is it, Lucas?
No. I mean, look, I do think... Look, anyone who's filmy is going to spot the different shot, like the different camera. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just how it's going to work. Weird, but there you go. I thought that was quite funny. I like that he dared people to spot the digital shots. Like, oh no, you can't tell the difference. You definitely can tell the difference between 35mm film and digital film, George. And good luck trying to convince us otherwise. So the Jedi Council set was too large to be saved, so they just put the chairs in storage instead of the full set. And for Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, they just used a background plate from this movie and then stuck the chairs in the foreground. That's insane. So they just filmed on blue screen. Cool. Skeletal C-3PO was puppeteered rather than worn, so actor Anthony Daniels didn't get inside the suit like he did last time. Instead, a gentleman stood behind the C-3PO puppet with like little sticks coming off different parts of his body. So as he moved, C-3PO moved, which means for the first time in the film's history, or the franchise history, Anthony Daniels was not responsible for C-3PO's movements, although he obviously had input because he was on set reading his lines. Good for him. I'm glad he got to do that, because otherwise, I think he has a lot of ownership of that character. So I wasn't even being facetious. I was like, good for him. Like, that's good that he did that. Despite the rumor that Anakin's alien friend is a young Greedo, this is not the case. It is indeed a Rhodian child, so the same species as Greedo. But there was actually a cut scene from after the race, where another Rhodian approached Anakin and was mad at him and claiming that he had he must have cheated, because clearly he'd bet on Anakin or Sebulba winning. And the young Rhodian, the one that people think is Greedo, says to him in Huttese, "Stay out of trouble, Greedo, or you'll come to a bad end." Which is a bit more of a winky, nudgy, hey, do you remember Star Wars?
Yeah, but again, fair play to them for the restraint, because not in a way that would damage the movie if you didn't know that.
Right, yeah. I mean, and also the restraint to just ultimately cut it, I guess. Because that is what they did. But yeah, agreed. 100% agreed. Last little bits of trivia. Liam Neeson brought his son, who was a toddler at the time, to the set. Despite being too young to be familiar with any of the characters, the kid saw R2-D2 parked on the set and then instinctively went over and gave him a hug. That's adorable.
Oh, that's great.
The highest grossing film of the prequel trilogy, and the highest grossing movie of 1999. And at the time of its release, it was the second highest grossing film worldwide after Titanic. For those wondering on the exact figures, its budget was about $115 million, which sounds like a lot, but actually, even at the time, is surprisingly lean. $115 million is pretty low, and it made $1 billion basically at the box office. 1 billion and then 27 million. Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to track. I assume the next two don't make as much money, but I'm intrigued to track what that looks like.
We will come back to that. So now, Chris, we've done the main triv. It's time for, you won't believe it, but we genuinely have one. Cars exist. So I didn't think we were going to have a Cars exist, and I thought I was going to do that horrible thing where I find an excuse to do horses exist, or guns exist, or lightsabers exist. I don't know, some of the offshoot of Cars exist. But actually, Chris...
Yeah, very much a rule. You could do nothing. That's fine. That's a rule you've set yourself.
It absolutely is. But it feels like a tradition at this point, and... why not? But luckily, there was a car-related piece of trivia that I was able to pinch for Cars Exist. So when young Anakin starts his pod racer for the first time, the ignition buttons on his panel are actually from a Fiat Uno, an Italian car launched in 1983.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with this piece of trivia, Dan, is that we all knew it. You might as well have been like, there are lightsabers in this movie. I mean, I don't know about you, but when that noise started, I'm immediately like, Fiat Uno, there it is.
Yeah, I saw that button. I've pressed that button many a time on my Fiat Uno.
Exactly.
So there you go. We did it, Chris. It took way longer than we were hoping, but, Star Wars, isn't it? Oh shit, we're nearly at 3 hours. We're nearly at 3 hours. Christ, I am sorry, listeners. Jesus.
Yeah, we expected that. It's all good.
We did. Yeah, there's a lot to discuss, and I think, I hope we did say things that either people haven't said before, or at least had a take on those things. That is my big worry, is just that we're not going to have anything to say that hasn't already been said 1,000 times. But yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see how this goes going forward. We know what movie is next. Obviously, we're doing Attack of the Clones. The big hook for next week is that, of course, going into it, I'm fairly confident that's the worst Star Wars movie ever made.
Yeah, same.
So tune in next week to find out if that turns out to be true. Or, of course, if you listen to this on iTunes or, any of the sort of public free platforms, and you're really interested in hearing what we had to say on Attack of the Clones, you can find out now by heading over to patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, where episodes of this are put up 1 week early. And that supports us, again, as little as $1 a month or more if you could afford it. If you can't afford it, though, don't worry about it. All good. You can continue to support us just by listening or sharing or commenting or reviewing or any of those interactions you can do on any of the platforms that you have. youtube.com/nothingbutstatic.uk. You can subscribe to us there. Or if you've got thoughts, leave comments there, or mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk is the email address to catch us on. So that is all of the spiel done lightning fast. I think that's the fastest I've ever done the end spiel. And now I know I can do it that fast. I'm going to... That's a challenge accepted for the next for the next time we do this. But yeah, thanks everyone so much for listening to this 2 hour and 50 minute. Jeez.
Whoa! You need the tradition. We need to do it properly. You need to check. You need to ask me.
Yeah, sorry, I was so worried about the time. I was just getting back. Chris, where are we going next week?
Attack of the Clones.
Yeah. Yeah, so there you go. That is officially now been dubbed Attack of the Clones. You're right. Actually, I do need to check, because technically, by the rules of the podcast, you could have been an agent of chaos there and chosen pretty much anything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we're doing Attack of the Clones, and I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Not to watching it, but to discussing it. So everyone remember the key lesson is that we all hate sand. That's the thing. It's the thing to really keep in mind as we head into next week.
Oh God!
So with that in mind, I throw over to Chris, who ends this podcast. How do you feel about sand, Chris?
I don't like it. It's coarse and it
gets everywhere.
My name's Chris Billingham.
My name's Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.
Eventually.